sort of set myself at the moment, please. Thank you.
Okay, we've started.
Good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee. This is a meeting of the Council which is being held remotely. The meeting is being recorded and streamed via YouTube, where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. The recording will be available on the Council's website following the meeting. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the Council's YouTube page during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the Council. Thank you very much. Members just remain muted and I'll indicate you wish to speak and I will call you. Item.
Sorry, Councillor. Yes, we've got Councillor Jeff Henry here tonight in place of Councillor Malcolm Buckley.
Thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Yes.
Chairman, when you move your papers, they must be near the microphone. We can all hear it.
Okay, cheers. I've actually moved the microphone away from the top onto the over the back to try and counter that. Okay, declarations of interest. Anybody decorate? Councillor Henry.
There's several items there, Mr. Chairman, that probably cross-reference with counties. So if I just record myself as a county member as well, please. Thank you.
Okay, can I assume then that Councillor Reid and Councillor Smith are also wishing to declare interest as county council members on general matters on the meeting, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, minutes.
Sorry, can I just ask for a point of clarification? We on item 5, the Landon Community Centre, part of the report talks around land transaction, etc. And I understand on the Policy and Resources Committee on the 3rd of December 2020, Councillor Kerry Smith declared an interest and withdrew from that item in discussion because of the land transaction, a potential declaration of interest. So I'm just wondering whether Councillor Smith will be taking part in that discussion item this evening.
Councillor Smith indicated to me this evening he was here to talk on the play area review only.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a rather craftily worded attempt at impugning the reputation of a member. If you speak with the monitoring officer, that I didn't even need to make that declaration. I over-declared. And if you wish to speak to Mr. Birkinshaw through the chair to Councillor Dadds, you are very welcome to see that. Your leader, Councillor Baggett, has seen that. Everything I do is way beyond above bold. And that sounds like an attempt at impugning my reputation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you, Councillor Dadds. We'll move on and do item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of February. If members will unmute themselves and we'll vote on whether or not it's a true record or not. Okay. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Dadds.
It is not a true record. Against.
Against. Councillor Blake.
In favour.
I'm looking around now for Councillor Yacoub.
Favour.
Councillor Henry wasn't here, he abstained, and I'll vote in favour. Okay. Item 4 is the Neighbourhood and Public Spaces Committee Work Programme. Before we do, I wish to add some items to it. First of all, on page 20, street naming and numbering policy and CCTV updates. I would like to put those for the June committee and then add these items for June: Pitsea swimming pool update, arts and culture, Wick Fest, etc., waste strategy, Landon Community Centre, tree strategy, climate change, and Wickford Market. Some of these are Wickford Market, and 1 or 2 of these have been in the pipeline, and I think we need to make progress on some of these. over the coming months. So we put them in for June. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Anybody with any further additions or amendments to the work programme? Councillor Baggott, I saw first.
Thank you, Chairman, and I didn't expect to be speaking so early. It's not to do with the work programme, it's just that as this is a public meeting viewed by the public, I just wanted to comment on Councillor Smith's comment that I'd seen information appertaining to Councillor Dads's issue. I just wanted to inform the committee that I actually haven't. I haven't seen anything in connection with that at all. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I might have been sent something, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, let's leave that one alone because I think it's irrelevant to this meeting because Councillor Smith, you know, he generally declares interest in all county council matters, whether he's on a committee there or whatever, as does other county council members, and I think that is entirely appropriate they do so.
Mr. Chairman, just for the public record, I appreciate Councillor Baggott has been through hell and back. It was sent to him the day the monitoring officer gave a formal response to my over declaration rather than under declaration, and I'm very happy to send him a copy right now.
Okay. And if that was sent to my council email address, I have informed officers for months now that I can't access my council emails, and that would explain it. But it does mean that I still haven't seen it, that's all.
Okay, now can we get back to the work programme? Councillor Dads.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just lower my hand. I'd like to add a couple of items to the work programme, if at all possible, please. I wondered if we could put the Landon Community Centre in relation to whether we can assess whether it can be an asset of community value to protect it.
Well, Councillor Daz, can I just say on the work programme, if it's Landon Community Centre, I've just said we leave it on there and that will cover all aspects, all aspects.
Would you mind if I just speak to the items that I want it to cover?
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, but we don't normally do this, do we?
Well, we have in the past.
Well, we haven't on this committee, and I try to run it in a normal way, and we stick to the operation in which the way we operate. Landon Community Centre, I've just added it to the work programme for the June committee, and now whether I'll be here or not, I don't know, but it's on the agenda, and then the scope of that will be dependent on who is the chairman and the membership come June. I think that's a fair way of doing it. So I'll leave that as it is. Was there another item, Councillor Dads?
Well, would you allow me, without us getting into the debate that we had last time, to respond to you, please?
Please. Landon Community Centre is on the work programme. I have just added it. Yeah. It covers every aspect of Landon Community Centre, and on the work programme, we are not going to lay down exactly. Otherwise, we can get a list that long. We're not going to go down.
I don't want to discuss the item. I know that you say that we will discuss the Landon Community Centre, but you don't have a crystal ball. I'm not being disrespectful, no. But there's two items that I would like the officers to put onto that. So when we get a report for the Landon Community Centre, they can take into account the two areas that I would like us to consider. Doesn't mean that we take it forward. So that is about whether it can be an asset of community value. And the second item relates to safeguarding. There has been raised in public that there were allegations of issues around safeguarding, which relates to obviously vulnerable adults and children. And I don't think we should be leaving it you don't know that I'm going to raise it, and we don't want to just leave it till June. I want to raise it now that members of the public. Can I suggest, Councillor Des, on safeguarding, that doesn't come under this committee. Can I suggest that on safeguarding generally, I think if you talk to Councillor Smith, he's got a committee coming up. I think that next week, I think it is, if someone will correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm sure he will pick up safeguarding at Landon Community Centre or anywhere in the borough. I'm sure he's listening tonight. He will pick that one up. But safeguarding is also for this committee because we're dealing with community assets. And if there are issues of abuse or negligence regarding children and vulnerable adults, we don't ignore it on this committee.
Well, Councillor Dads, I'm going to stop you now. I don't want to use the mute button tonight, but please, just bear with us. Landon Community Centre is coming up in a moment. You're now making, which some people may quite feel are allegations. I don't know about any of this at all. I've steered clear. So let's get on with the meeting. And the main point tonight, I want to hear the petitioner who's got a petition. Now let's have a good meeting, please, and not have the interruptions we had last time. Okay, that's the work programme. I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy to add assets of community value under Landon Community Centre. I've no problem with that at all.
But not the safeguarding. You don't think
on safeguarding? No, I think that becomes.
You want to ignore safeguarding.
Councillor Heads, you've started again. I don't want to have the mute button. That's not my way I operate. But please, don't keep interrupting. Next year, if you're a chairman of a committee, you can carry on how I carry on and hope people don't interrupt you. You're a former member of this council. You should know how to behave. So please do so. Thank you. With those added items, I will now take the vote on the work programme. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Yacoub. So if you can unmute yourself, apologise.
Favour.
Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Councillor Dads.
Because you've not added the
Councillor Dads, you will vote in favour or against, not a speech. Thank you. Are you in favour or against?
I'm against.
Against, thank you. Councillor Henry.
It's going to be a busy June. In favour. Thank you.
It will be a busy June. I'm in favour also. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we will now move on. I'm trying to move the papers out of the way. To the Landon Community Centre. Now, if we can let Mr. Clark in, please.
Just while he's joining, Councillor, Mr. Clark has 5 minutes.
Yes.
And Sarah will hold the timer up like doing planning committee.
And there will be no interruptions while during those 5 minutes of Mr. Clark speaking, please.
So, Mr. Clark, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
I'm looking for Mr. Clark. Is he on screen as well?
Mine's gone on to a second screen, Councillor.
Oh dear. Okay. This is I love it when you do second screens.
There you go. I've got 2 screens as well.
I can now see a picture of you. So we're making progress anyway.
Well, that's
Ryan,
unfortunate. That's better.
That's better. That's brilliant. Now I can see.
How do you people cope with so many screens?
Now let me first of all, you will have 5 minutes to speak, but I think first of all for the public, I'll read out the petition if you don't mind. So then you can have 5 minutes to address the committee. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Right. We've received this petition of over 1,000 signatures, which says, we the undersigned petition the council to immediately halt all activity at Landon Community Centre until a full and independent survey into its viability can be undertaken and provide a full, open and transparent public consultation to assess the needs of the whole community. It is imperative that a full consultation with the public be undertaken to establish the needs of all community members and provide a comprehensive strategy for recognising their needs. Paul, you now have 5 minutes and someone's going to hold a clock up somewhere if you could actually see it, but away you go.
Okay. As petitioner, representing 1,051 signatories and over 3,900 residents, we'd like to thank you for the 5 minutes to lay out our concerns and address the committee. From the beginning, residents and centre users have had questions about the centre reopening. And over the last 3 months, the administration's approach to answering these questions has done little to ease fears. It didn't take long for residents to grow tired of the contradictions, misinformation, personal attacks on social media, and this has caused much upset and much frustration with residents. The more residents sought answers, the more vitriolic and accusatory the attacks from the leader became, while all residents really wanted were some straight answers and truthful answers to what are legitimate questions. Nobody has been more successful in galvanising a whole community into action, as has Councillor Callaghan, and comments about likening refurbishment of the centre to putting lipstick on a pig have really been unhelpful and have not helped residents at all. To this end, we've almost 4,000 very concerned and very confused residents that don't believe that they're being listened to and don't feel that they will get a fair and unbiased consultation. Agenda 5 opens with the heading background and then immediately begins a narrative of a centre that's fallen down, unable to meet the needs of the community, although it's been doing so for 28 years until March 2020 when it closed. The report paints a picture of a centre fit only for demolition, backed up with notional figures based solely on guesswork and nothing factual. No surveys beyond the standard annual and periodic surveys have been completed, and no formal costings or plans have been put forward. There's been no structural, drainage, roofing or heating surveys carried out, contrary to Councillor Callaghan's statements to residents that they had. Periodic electrical and safety surveys that have been carried out are by no means damning. Electrical surveys identified cracked plug sockets and 2 non-standard circuit breakers, and fire safety highlighted instances that clearly have been pre-existing and in some cases present since the building was erected, but these have been used as reasons to keep the building closed. Items such as heating have been quoted at 700,000, ventilation 300,000, roofing works at 345,000, and requests by means of freedom of information have confirmed that no such reports or costings have ever been undertaken. So with no concrete facts, residents are expected to enter into consultation and choose between a new or a refurbished centre completely uninformed. Instead, the community has been given nothing but misinformation from the leader in increasing attempts to prevent the centre from reopening at all costs. And it's now becoming clear as to why that is. In the Policy and Resources Committee on the 3rd of December, it's clear that land was promised to George Martin and 2 land swaps were authorised under Part 2 restriction, thus selling off a community asset to the disenfranchisement of local residents without their consultation and without leaseholder consent. Talks were well underway before the keys were even handed back, and again without the leaseholder being present. With reference to the proposed consultation, as it stands, there's no option for refurbishment, and this is the main purpose of the residents group. Of the 4 options put forward, only option 3 mentions refit, and it does so along terms such as remodelling and demolition. So residents have no desire to choose such an option with such an open-ended scope that might afford the council full remit on works. Once again, residents are presented what would appear to be a blinkered view with only demolition and redevelopment on the cards. A few items that I've been asked to raise by members was that some of the clubs have been moved to other centres such as Landon West and Blue House, but these have no different ventilation system than the Landon Community Centre.
30 seconds, Brian.
Okay, it's been previously commented that the day centre propped up the association, but Freedom of Information has proved that only £9,800 of hall hire was ever paid within a year. Also, the cover sheet mentions Landon Park, Langdon Hills and Lee Chapel as neighbouring wards. But again, we have Nethermain mentioned many times. Nethermain is vast, and including that in the consultation, we feel would skew the results of any consultation. So to that end, we reiterate the petition and ask that all works on the Landon Community Centre be halted until a independent survey can be undertaken. Only then do we feel that a fair, open and transparent consultation can take place. And sorry, I went over.
Okay, Brian. Okay, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.
If you like to mute yourself. Can I just say, introduce the item now, which is the agenda item starts on page 23. Now, before we start, let me explain. The report is in my name. I've gone through with officers many times in the drafting of this report. I have not been involved in any way whatsoever, but any social media, any email exchanges, other than on the 27th of October last year with the one remaining trustee on the question of handing over the lease, the keys. That's the only email conversation I've had with anybody on the subject. I've gone through this. Now, I might have caused a problem in some ways because I asked to include in it how we dealt with the community asset reviews. So they're there, and generally, and I think it's made a bit of conflict with the options referring to that. But I want to change some of these recommendations. So let me start on page 23. Item 1 will be, having considered the issues raised in the petition related to Landon Community Centre, the committee approves the initial consultation and engagement plan for the Landon Community Centre as set out in Closure 2. It will be as amended, because I'll tell you why in a moment, to identify the needs of local residents, together with an independent survey of the building. We approve the expenditure for the delivery of the consultation. 4 will read that officers explore alternative facilities for the Landon Activity Centre and other hirers on a temporary basis, and to bring a report back to this committee for decision if this results in additional expenditure for the council. And the last one, that officers bring a further report to this committee with the outcome of the consultation, together with the result of the independent survey. So that's what we'll be voting on tonight. The amendments to the consultation would include this additional question. If the consultation identifies that the current building would not meet the identified needs of residents, would you prefer the council to remodel the existing building or to demolish the existing building and to construct a new centre designed to meet future needs? This would be subject to a further consultation. And the last, on page 39, the question which was, what do you feel is most needed by the local community? Amended to read, what do you feel the community most need from a Landon Community Centre? So we identify it's for the Landon Community Centre. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I do not want, and I ask members who've been involved in social media activity, I ask members, I don't want to go into a load of detail about how the centre was run, all the past history, allegations or anything at all, because what I'm trying to do is listening to 1,000 petitioners who've asked for a consultation. The consultation we do must be on a need basis only because of PERDA. We could leave it for later on, but we're not going to do that. We want to get this going because I think it's important. So we're on that road. So I don't want to get into a big debate about things that I don't think are necessary tonight, because all I want to do is try and meet the need of the petitioners. Okay. Councillor Ferguson, I understand that the amendments, you were going to second the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to second the amendments.
Okay, so we understand what we're talking about now then. So I'm not going to allow Councillor Dowds, if you please mute yourself till I finish speaking. Thank you. It's simple. It's a little red button on the bottom corner. You press it and it mutes yourself. Obviously, you don't know where the button is, obviously. Okay. I'm going to bring in Councillor Henry first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This whole situation is a mess. It's a mess from start to finish, and As I said in full council, the problem with this situation started by the fact that there was too much being said about it. None of it fact, but too much being said about it. And a great deal of offence has been taken on that. I'm grateful for some of the amendments you've made to the consultation document. But again, the petition and my previous requisition for an EGM requested that at all times there would be an option for the Landon community, and that's the people, not the building, to keep the building, retain the building in its current form. I understand the need for authorities to review, their provision arrangements with community centres. I completely understand that, but this hasn't been handled correctly. And we absolutely need an option that this will be a retained building if they want it to be. I understand that you throw the net out there to see, are we missing a trick with the wider community? But you've got almost 4,000 people on a group that want to protect something that they've already got, that they've had for a great number of years. We conflate the difference between the over 50s club and the bar, but they're all interlinked. This is a strong community. These people have had births, deaths, and marriages there. There's some of the the most trying times of their lives as a community have been lived together, celebrated together, mourned together in that building. It's not unreasonable for a community to stamp its foot and demand that they get to retain an asset that's theirs. I've never seen. I've lived here 35 years. I'm less than half a mile from there. I've never seen so many members of my community so passionate about anything at all before. So I would ask that we do have an option that building be retained and restored. And if it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of money. But I would ask that be an option, rather than just, I understand PERD, I understand that. But at some point, we've got to put the needs of provision to one side and deal with the wants of a community that's already a well-established community. I do have concerns about decanting people off to other community centres, and whether or not then that sets a precedent and they'll never get back to more local. But this is a great community centre. It's not pretty. It's not a pretty building, but it is much loved, and the community want it back. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Blake next and Councillor Dance. Just ask, I've got two screens. Not everyone's on the screen now, so I'm trying to flick between screens. And can I ask Julie if she can ensure that if she sees members I can't see, because I've got sort of plenty of officers, other additional members on the meeting tonight, and it's very difficult to see everybody. I've got Councillor Baggott, I've seen his hand as well. Can I just say to Councillor Henry, the additional question I moved, I thought did retain the existing build. It may need to be remodelled. I think everyone would accept that to meet today's requirements, but I see that as being the existing building. So
I think then,
yeah, come back.
I think perhaps then, Mr. Chairman, there's room for us to do some work on the phraseology of that question, so that we can get it right for residents and be clear on what that means. Be clear on what the outcome of.
I will say I'm being advised on the question. This was the problem, and I'm sure someone will come in, one of the officers, Mr. Brace or somebody, that because of PERDA, the type of question you ask is somewhat limited. It can be on a needs basis only. The wording, yes, we may be able to change wording. As I said at the beginning, I'm trying to be proactive on this. I don't want to just react to what's been said, what people have been saying online, etc., etc. I've heard about things. I haven't taken any sides whatsoever. I started off in Landon. I know Landon very well. I was around when it was first opened. I'll bring Councillor Henry back one more time. Then I'm going to move on to Mr. Brace to answer that question on the wordings.
Yeah,
sorry.
go on.
Can I just chuck in there as well? Also, it would be an idea to have a look at that area that you're looking to consult. This should certainly include Crouch. It's at the other end of the same street the building's on. It absolutely must include Crouch. We've probably got a good bit more in common with parts of Billericay, perhaps, than parts of Kerry's ward. So we need to include Crouch at the very least.
Okay, Mr. Brace.
May I raise a point of order, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. What point of order?
You asked the question, do we now all understand what we're discussing? I raised my hand and I actually said no. Unfortunately, I couldn't write down the amendments that you were making, and I wondered if you've got it in writing so we can all see the amendment.
No, you haven't. I haven't got it in writing. No, this isn't a meeting.
Unfortunately, you went through it.
Okay,
I couldn't pick it up.
I'll repeat it again for your benefit, Mr. Dance. We're asking that, having considered the issues raised in the petition relating to
Can you
Landon.
go slower, because I've got to write it. I'm sorry. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I can't write that fast.
Well, you'll have to wait then, because I'm not going to read it out again now. I'll read it out again when we vote.
No,
Okay.
no, but I want to understand what we're discussing.
Please, Councillor Dadds.
We're entitled to know what we're discussing.
Councillor Dadds, I've listened to your point of order. I've ruled on it from the chair. I'm not reading it out again at this point in time. Mr. Brace.
I don't know what you're discussing.
Well, that means you won't say much, doesn't it? Mr.
Pardon?
Brace.
Pardon?
Mr. Brace, I'll call him Mr. Brace.
What
Will
did
you
you
mute
say?
yourself? Mr. Dadds, will you please mute yourself?
Councillor Dadds, please.
Councillor Dadds. I'm sorry, Councillor Dadds, JP Barrister.
Yes.
Mr. Dadds, please.
Councillor Henry, the change to the last question, quite happy to adapt that to add, because the remodel is definitely to retain the current building and remodel, so we can phrase that appropriately. Apologies, because that's officer speak, but we will definitely do a sense check of it before it would go out. So we will, as a ward member, we will pass that to you beforehand to look at anyway for comment. And certainly members of the committee. So we'll be working on that after this meeting. So we'll take those comments on board. And just to clarify that, I know Mr. Clark had come in that we're seeking views from the whole of Nethermain. It was only Lee Chapel South. So sorry that wasn't clear.
So that extends. Sorry, Chairman. That extends to like the Nares area, but not beyond. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Lee Chapel South boundary. So apologies if there was some confusion over that.
Can I say, Councillor Henry, that may be officer speak, this wording, but you should have seen it before it was officer speak. Okay, Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. I do agree with Councillor Henry regarding it going across to Crouch as well, because that's probably closer than a lot of the other areas you're actually talking about. So if that could be added, that would be much appreciated. I have not been involved in any of the politics surrounding this that have been going on. I have spoken and emailed personally to the Landon community, and initially didn't get the response I asked for, but secondly, they certainly did give me the answers I required. And I was going to ask if they could be taken separately, because there was a couple of issues they raised. But having said that, I do feel that you've addressed those issues. I just want to clarify in my head and give an example, so hopefully I'm right. When it comes to remodel, because not everything gets used an awful lot. It might be a question for an officer really more than anything else. Are we going along the same sort of lines as we did with the sporting village? And I use that loosely in the sense that you would like to see all the sports go back into the sporting village that we took away from other areas. But when we looked at it, I remember, bless him, Councillor Ben Williams said we should have put some squash courts in the sporting village, because they're essential, because anytime he wanted to go down and play squash, he could always get on the courts. And I said, well, there's the problem. It's not getting used. So is that what you're talking about when the terms remodelling? If it's not work, maybe there's another way around it, or we could maybe add something to it rather than just keep taking away. But is that the scenario we're looking at?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not sure, to be
No,
honest.
it probably might be
I'll be honest with you, Kevin. I've got Mr. Brace and Leslie O'Shea both wishing to speak. Ladies first, then.
No, I was just going to clarify the point. So remodel is what it says on, I haven't got the page number, but under the asset review options under that section. So it can be anything from significant alterations to the existing asset to a complete demolition and renewal. And that obviously is clearly going to be defined by the consultation. So it's a very, very broad spectrum in there. The retain the asset, which is explained in a bit more detail on the following page, is really about, obviously we know it requires significant investment, but it's keeping it more or less exactly as it is with that investment.
And you're partly right, Councillor Blake, that if, for example, squash was the biggest sport on earth now, it may be that need to be identified through the survey. So we would want to remodel to get squash courts into the existing building. So it's yes, that's what we're trying to identify from the survey. So then we can see exactly what the building is currently and what the need looks like. That may match exactly. There may be some very different things that we'll need to consider, but that's the purpose of the consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. Councillor Baggott.
Thank you, Chairman. And I welcome the spirit which I believe that you've entered into with the amendments that you gave, and I would thank you for that. Just on a point of that, though, and this is just maybe it's me being a little bit retentive, but you obviously put a lot of thought into the amendments that are going to be made. You've got a seconder, so Councillor Ferguson's had the chance to read them. It shouldn't have been beyond the wit of officers and the chairman to have been able to produce something for all the members to see, because it is quite wordy. This is an important issue, and as we've heard from Mr. Clark, of concern to a lot of people, having something that members could read, so to be able to debate from a position of knowledge, may just have helped. I don't want to be critical, but that's just my view. When it comes to consultation, what we all know, and we've sat in the past on scrutiny committees where we've had this same conversation, that it is very easy to word a conversation to lead people down a certain path. And PERDA gets thrown into the mix on so many times, I think sometimes erroneously. We've heard from a resident. I think they're just throwing PERDA in as a way that the consultation or the wording of it needs to be slightly altered, is a little bit disrespectful to the community, to be honest. For instance, a very simple way of asking a question could be, do you prefer for the Landon Centre to be refurbished, or do you want a brand new one? That's a pretty simple choice. And it leads you down a certain path of what the responses are. Because when you look at the responses of, were it to be a brand new centre, what would you like? Infers that when people said, oh, I'd like a badminton court, that they also are signing up to a brand new centre. When in fact, what they might want is just a badminton court in the existing centre. So the consultation, the wording of it is absolutely crucial. And I hope that a bit more thought and a bit more debate will take place on that to ensure that that consultation is fit for purpose. I mean, from my point of view, because I do know that this is a matter of public concern, and it was very well elocuted by the petitioner. When we take administration, we will keep the centre as it is and repurpose it so that it's fit for purpose. And we will then work with the community to ensure that that centre is a community centre that suits what the community want, and we give them what they want, not what we think they want, or consultants in some ivory tower are telling them they want. And I just want to be very clear to the community on that, because that is where our stance is as a group, and that's what we'll do. And this is an opportunity for you as the chairman to join that, listen to residents, and actually do something that's right for something which is clearly, I mean, 1,005 signatures, as you know, is a significant amount. for the public to have galvanised itself, and I congratulate them for doing so, shows the strength of feeling. And I think that this committee now has a great opportunity to show the residents that the committee is about residents and not just about a bricks and mortar building. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. My apologies. I mean, I was still drafting these at 6:30, to be honest. Apologise for not getting it typed up and printed, but I've got limited resources here as well, despite emailing people. So, you know, please accept that. Please accept that. On the consultation, I think the consultation at this time is very, very difficult because of PERDA. You've just explained your political point, in effect. What would happen if there's a change in administration? I'm sure Councillor Callaghan, who's present, might say something similar later on. I think it's a pity this has got involved in politics at all, because it's the people of Landon, the users of it, we should really be interested in totally. And all, you know, I've tried to steer, I have steered clear of all of that, and I don't want to be associated with any of it. I've tried to meet the needs of the petitioners. The consultation is difficult, the questions. Anybody could devise different questions, as you've just said. And whatever questions you put, you could get totally different answers by the way 5 or 6 words are put in different ways, perhaps. So it is difficult. It is difficult.
Councillor Harrison, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. Councillor Yakub's been waiting for some time to speak.
Okay.
Shadow hand up for a while.
Yes, Councillor Dadds has as well. We've got him next, then Councillor Yakub. I can see her now. She suddenly moved onto this page from another page. I don't know how you did it. Well done. Okay. Can I just ask Mr. Brace if he's still here somewhere? Mr. Brace,
I'm here.
On the questions, because they are limited, and I understand that's because of this of PERDA. What's the timescale for doing a consultation?
We are looking to start around the 22nd or 23rd, and we'll run that for, I think Tom and Sam are in the room. They'll let you know for how long. So we have some time to double check the wording. If there's anything that you wish to change that we could talk to other committee members about, we've got time to do that, Councillor, if you so wish.
Yeah, I'm of a mind, if people are prepared to put politics to one side, for Councillor Baggott, Councillor Smith, Councillor Callaghan, not myself, but the 3 main other group leaders, Councillor Blake as a group leader. If he's not interested, go through, come up.
I'm not a group leader.
Well, you're not, sorry. I forgot. You change monthly, don't you? Okay, I'll leave you out of it, Kevin. But I don't know. Councillor Callaghan's there. I would like to get some consensus for a consultation for the people who are most concerned about Landon Community Centre. And I'm going to say this, and not in a nasty way, but it doesn't include Councillor Dadds, because Councillor Dadds is a Billericay councillor. But Councillor Baggott as a group leader. Councillor Smith, you're here somewhere. You know, and Councillor Callaghan is somewhere, I believe. I mean, that's my suggestion, that the 3 of you can agree the wording of a consultation which meets the requirements of the petitioner and what might well be the feelings of this committee. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have to remember the rules of PERDA. It's not just the Conservative group, the Independent group and the Labour group. There might be a Green councillor elected to pick out one. There could be the Basildon Communist or Owners Party standing. They could get a councillor elected. So the point is, we have to be fair. I think what you said about the 3 group leaders is a point, but I think the officers should write this in an impartial way that would stand up to any legal outside scrutiny with the PERDA process and have naturally passed it through my eyes, Councillor Baggott and Councillor Callaghan. But will be people on that ballot paper who have no representation in the council, even the Liberal Democrats. But I think there's more chance of a Basildonite on the moon than a Lib Dem elected in May in Basildon.
Oh, yeah, you made your point, Councillor Smith, very valid. I wasn't suggesting the three group leaders sat together and performed it. I was suggesting that they get together, and it would be with officers. It's got to meet the requirements of PERDA and what this committee wants to find out. What we want to find out is what the people of the community of Landon and the area want. Councillor Callaghan, do you wish to come in? Is there...
Not at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Yacoub.
Thank you, Chairman. I think as a council, we have committed to being really open and transparent and to empowering residents to feel a sense of ownership over the communities that they belong to. And I think with that in mind, it's really important that we have a consultation where we put the question to our residents to be able to tell us whether they want a remodel or they want us to demolish and rebuild. And I'm really thankful to you, Councillor Harrison, for taking on board some of my suggestions around adding in that question and some of the rewording. But I'm also really proud that we're listening to our residents, we're listening to this petition, and we're talking about having an independent survey on this, because as I said, it's really important for residents to know that we care and we understand how much this community centre means to them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Can I push something a bit further then? On what I read out as an additional question, from what Councillor Baggott has said, and I think what Councillor Henry has said, if such a question was only one question, which I think would meet what Councillor Yacoub is saying, was, would you prefer the council to retain and remodel the existing building or to demolish the existing building and construct a new centre designed to meet future needs? If it was a one question consultation, which Councillor Baggott suggested, I think, I'm just tossing that in the air.
Chairman, if as it's tossed in the air, I'll catch it and fling it back. Yeah, I think that it should be the starting point, a very clear indication so that any other questions that are asked are clearly delineated as to where people are coming from. And you can't get clearer than, do you want to keep the existing centre or do you want it to be knocked down and repurposed?
Yeah.
And that should be the starting point to take things forward.
Okay, Councillor Yacoub, is that what you were suggesting?
I would be happy with that, yeah.
Councillor Henry.
We need to be somewhere in the ballpark of that we keep what they have already. There's plenty of scope to remodel the building and add services, but what we don't want to do is to take community services that are much loved and much valued away. So I think we're
I agree about the services. This wasn't to talk about the services, it's purely to talk about the building. I think the services
if we can return as is or better, I'm happy. The community, I'm very sure, will be happy. What they want is they don't want a flash new building imposed on them when they love the one they've got.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Dadds.
Mr. Chairman, I have much to say about the report. I know that you said on the outset that you want to restrict the speeches, but I wish to speak to the report. The officer's report talks about background, asset review, exploring the options, as well as talking about the current works and the community consultation. And I'll be as brief as I can, but cover those points.
Can I stop you for one moment, if I may? I would like to just get some indication. I've got it from your leader from Councillor Henry and Councillor Yacoub, or just the other members of the committee, first of all, is on a one question consultation based on the premise of retain the existing building, remodel it, obviously to meet needs, or demolish. Basically, that was the 3 points I think Councillor Henry made, Councillor Baggott made, and Councillor Yacoub suggested.
Yes, I do have a view about that, and I'll cover that within my speech that I've prepared and planned for. Like yourself, I read the report. I've made quite a lot of notes that I want to talk to, if I would be allowed to speak uninterrupted, Mr. Chairman, if at all possible.
Okay, I don't want to go into a lot of detail on history. Okay, thank you. Councillor Dadds.
Thank you. Firstly, I know that we have a number of members of the public present, and I believe whilst mention has been made about politics, I think the public have raised a number of concerns, and I'm here to represent local voices and the public. We as councillors are in effect a channel of communication between the communities which we serve and the council, representing the views of others and speaking up for them when they're unheard. And you've heard from Brian, who is speaking on behalf of hundreds upon hundreds of users of the Landon Centre. My primary role is to ensure accountability of public services, act for the community, shape the way that we make decisions and how we consult. And more importantly, what we're trying to do is build a better place to live and work and socialise for the residents. And that's why my voice, as well as anyone else, should be heard without being silenced. I respect everyone here, but I like to be respected too, and I take my role as a councillor very seriously. I have a number of concerns regarding the report, and particularly around the report at pages 28 to 29 regarding what they say are the costs for repair. I have not seen any primary evidence, and what I mean by that, any surveyors' reports, any disrepair reports regarding what the actual needs are. The report is lacking of substance, and the validity of some of these claims cannot be tested by me as an elected member. There is community consultation and identifying the needs, and it says before any decisions are made on redesign, refurbishment, remodelling future facilities, it's important to understand needs. Obviously, I understand the need to go out and ask what people want and what they need, but by phrasing the question that way, there is not a choice regarding retention of the building, which I think has raised some concern, and you've raised that as a question. I know that some councillors have talked about there might be need for remodelling as opposed to demolition, but as we've heard from the officer, the definition of remodelling can be refitting the existing structure to complete demolishing the structure. So remodelling as a definition means anything from complete bulldozing the building to possibly putting a lick of paint on it. So therefore that scope is too wide, too broad. If you ask that question, would you like it to be remodelled?
Councillor Dadds, sorry to interrupt you. Can I remind you of the wording I said, which remodel the existing building or to demolish. So the remodelling specifically wasn't including demolish.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that I'm not interrupted, and of course you can correct me at the end or make a comment thereafter. I'd like to continue uninterrupted if I may.
Well, I am chairing the meeting, Councillor Dadds. It's fair to point out an inaccuracy if you say it. Thank you. Carry on.
Well, the point of the option 3 definition, as I've just described, was actually said by the officer after you spoke. So I think the officer was re-correcting you in relation to your definition. The professional officer of this council has said the definition is set out at page 27, and it says major remodelling of the building could be undertaken that range from refitting the existing structure to complete demolish and the structure of a new fit building. So I'm going from what the report says in front of me, and that's what I'm saying. We are having a misunderstanding about what it means, and if we, having read the report, have that misunderstanding, then the public will have a misunderstanding too. What I would say, I was just about to go on, it talks about option 4, retention of the asset. Now, what I would seek to ask, and I asked to make that as an amendment to the consultation so it is clear, that I would probably want to have the question phrased in this way, that retention of the asset which is refurbished. That's very clearly understood. People know what that means. So you retain the asset which is refurbished. Now, what you said earlier on is that the other option could be remodeling for future use. When you add for future needs and future use on the question that you phrased, I think you can use it for both questions, because otherwise it could mislead the public. So retain the asset which is refurbished for future needs, or you can say remodel the building which is for future needs, because both of them need to meet future needs. But if you only tag that onto one question, it could mislead the public, because I think the building should, as an asset, should be retained. It should be refurbished, however, and for future needs. But the public need to be asked that, because they may take a different view, of course, and that's why we're here to represent them. I will be cautious not to go into the safeguarding and the allegations made there, and I'll leave that for another day, and I will respect you on that, and I won't comment on it today. But in relation to the building itself, I think it is important that any consultation that is undertaken does take into account all the different users, and I'd ask that all the users are identified from the association. I mean, there are art classes, there's badminton, dancing, there are bad nights, there's basketball, bingo, over 50s club, as you know, there's the chess club, the children's dance school, the churches, the computer club, you have craft activities, you have a number of first responders doing classes there, you have football, five-a-side, you have foreign language lessons, including you have internet classes too, hairdressing. It goes on and on and on about the users. And I think any consultation, we should make sure that the stakeholders, those who have put their heart and soul into that building, are consulted, and we get to a clear understanding of what their needs are. This is a community asset. In relation to the comments regarding the land transaction, which is at page 30, I'd like to just comment on that very briefly. The council talks about the need, or there has been a transaction, or likely to be a transaction. I do remind all members, and Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you can take it up with officers, that Councillor Henry did bring to full council a motion that put a moratorium on any disposal of the land. And it's my understanding that actually some of the land has been carved out, about 1,600 square metres, and been promised to be sold, or is in a process of being sold. And I think it is important that the full council's resolution made on the 10th of December 2020 and voted for all council is upheld, and that no land whatsoever used by the LCC is sold. I think that's very, very important. As I say, I think the issue of getting the centre up and running, I wished actually that maybe Paul Brace or someone else can comment on it, whether we can, in part at least, get the building up and running. I did speak to the trustee, Vic York, who I believe is referenced in the report, and I spoke to him at length, and he gave me the history. And whilst I'm not going into the history of the running of the site, but it is important for members to understand, and I've spoken to the trustee, that a farmer back in the 1940s, thereabouts, gave land over in Landon to the Landon community, have a community asset. And obviously, as we know, in the 80s, that land was swapped over for where the current site is. So whilst the council may be the legal owner, I would say the beneficial owner of this site is the public, the community, which has been using it for years and years and years, of decades in that area. And it is them that have the benefit of this site. Whilst we may be the legal owner, they are the beneficiaries of this land, and we must take their views into account and protect their rights. So I certainly believe that we should be opening the centre, even as an interim measure, so that if it's a small hall or whether it's the social aspect, whatever part of the building we can open, we should open. I spoke to Vic York. He said when it was closed because of COVID and the first lockdown, you could have, as it was left, could have come in, turned the key and opened it. You would have had to do the water checks. You would have to go through and make sure the maintenance was up to date. And you'd obviously up to date your normal operating procedures. But he was saying it was fit to reopen once lockdown was over and COVID restrictions did not apply. So this asset has been lost to the community at the moment, and any closure should be minimal. I don't buy PERDA. I understand if you write questions which are biased, I can understand you've got to be careful. But a question that says we will retain the asset, which...
That's not a question. You're saying we will retain it.
Well, no, you ask the public, do you wish to retain the asset, which is to be refurbished for future needs? That's a simple question that people can say yes or no. People can then answer also, do you wish to have it demolished? The next question could be, do you want it to be remodeled? Because remodeled could be that it's reduced in size. And I am concerned that I have asked multiple questions that have still been unanswered, and there may be intentions in the future, once the site has been remodeled and reduced, that housing could be put on it. And I don't think that is right. And we should protect this community asset and make sure the community keep their asset, all the land. Full councils voted that none of the land should be sold. And I think it is important that we listen to residents and get that community centre up and running. There has been lots of misinformation. All I want is to see that centre open as soon as possible so the community which it serves can go back and in fact enjoy it. We are ripping out the heart of the community, a valued asset, and it needs to be protected.
Thank you, Councillor Dadds. I'm going, Councillor Callaghan, did you have your indication? You did.
I did, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much indeed. If I can start with looking at the petition itself and the wording of the petition. It asks for all activity at the Landon Community Centre to be halted. That happened back in November when the lease was handed back to the council. It asks for an independent survey to be undertaken, and the council is committing to doing exactly that. It asks for provision to be made for a full and open and transparent public consultation to assess the needs of the whole community. Now, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm disappointed that members of the opposition tonight don't agree with that, because what I've heard, and I can't be the only one who sits here and thinks the position changes in every single meeting from the opposition where they continue to look for a smoking gun. Councillor Henry started off by talking about the building must be kept in its current form and that we don't know what the community wants. It must be kept in its current form. That is a fait accompli. So on the one hand, the opposition are arguing tonight that the administration is hell-bent on knocking the building down and rebuilding something new. That is what they are alleging. But equally, the other side of it also applies, which is that the opposition are suggesting that if they were in administration, they would keep the existing building and they wouldn't provide a new one if that is what the public come back and say that they want. So I personally don't think we should predetermine a public consultation. And I think actually what the committee system is proving tonight is that it is incredibly effective at scrutinising, something which the Audit and Risk Committee last week demonstrated more ably than I am able to in the time I have tonight, that there was a fundamental lack of scrutiny over these community centres over the last 10 years. And I think, Mr. Chairman, we need to be clear about this, and this is why I want to explain my position in full and the position as a group leader of my party. We are in essence dealing here with three different component parts. The first part of it is to do with maintenance and upkeep of a physical building, of a physical asset, and that falls within the remit of this committee to determine. But the second part of it is around the policies around what we want our assets to do. And in the report before members tonight, it does reference and talk about the asset review. And there are a series of policies that need to take place. Now, it won't be for tonight, and I'm not going to go over old ground here. This will come to policy resources tomorrow, and we will have this debate tomorrow night at P&R. But there is very clear problems here, which is since 2013 to the present day, under the previous administration's last day in office back in 2019, there was only £500,000 that was budgeted for the upkeep of the centre. So when you look in this report here that is before us tonight, and you see that on page 29, it lists the full costs of the works that are now needed on that building that total 2.1 million. Even if you took out ventilation on the basis that is a COVID reality, a new spend, there are huge sums of money there for works that for the last decade haven't taken place. And so when in the budget back on the 25th of February, whenever it was, we allocated £1 million a year every year for the next 10 years, we need to ensure that what is listed on page 29 never ever happens again in our community assets. That the taxpayer is never lumbered with a £2 million bill at the end of their lease. Because, and this is the reality, and this is why I'm nervous about your suggestion, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to reopen that centre, what we hear in front of the officers tonight is that is a £2.1 million spend. And what it also says is that these figures do not take into account the potential cost of borrowing to fund the works. So we need to understand what would be a repayment plan. How would the money be repaid and over what period so that the taxpayer can be sure that that is a value for money investment? And this comes back to the point. If the public are minded to go down the route of saying they want a refurbished building, a rebuild, a complete rebuild, it may very well be the case that costs more than £2.1 million. Now, the difference is that it may generate more money, so it can therefore pay back that cost over a quicker period. Now, all of those economic assessments, they need to be assessed. And one of the things that does need to happen, and Policy and Resources will look at this, is the scrutiny of the leases and of the association. And I agree completely with what Councillor Dadd said. You won't hear me say that very often, but I completely agree. We need accountability, because the lease on this building was £1 a year. That was all that the rent was to the council from the association, £1 a year. There was in the lease, it's very clear, the report details it. The major structural works was the responsibility of Basildon Council. It was not the responsibility of the association. That again, we see that what's happened on page 29 of the report. So this association only had to pay £1, and they didn't have to pay any money towards major structural works, but it didn't have enough money to keep itself afloat. So somewhere, something has gone wrong in a centre that is much loved, well used, doesn't have to pay any rent, doesn't have to pay for any structural works, but doesn't have any money. So how could we be sure that £2.1 million of taxpayers' money would be a value for money investment and could be repaid? The reality is no one, not a single councillor that sits here tonight with whatever colour rosette would be able to answer that question. So there is a whole economic side. There's a business case. There's a tracing of the data that needs to happen. And that's the third part of this, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Dadd's talked about the hirers of the building. The reality is, as we sit here now as a council, because we've devolved everything, responsibility, blame, everything to the community since 1993, and I was 4 years old, so I can be blamed for a lot of things, but in 1993, I wasn't around to set this lease, right? But in 1993, we devolved the responsibility and blame. We do not have, as a council, the ability, you as the chairman and as committee members, you do not have the ability right now to scrutinise data on usage, to be able to sit here and say, these are the number of hirers, it's going up, it's going down. This is the amount they're paying, it's going up, it's going down. You're not able to scrutinise who is using the building. So what postcodes, are they local residents who are using it? Are they travelling from Crouch or from Nethermain or wherever it might be? You cannot do that. This does not exist. And that is a tragedy, because again, as councillors of any and all political parties, how do you make a decision about where to spend taxpayer money if you do not have the data? And as I sit here, the only thing I hear the opposition say is there's a Facebook page. Well, that Facebook page doesn't allow anybody on it who doesn't agree that it should be a refurbished building. And it has kicked everybody off who says that we should look at a rebuild. So it is not, may I suggest, Mr. Chairman, as simple as just being able to sit here now and say it's this or that. We should go out and we should ask a much more detailed set of questions, which is what we should be doing here tonight, of what does the community want the community asset to do? What is it that they actually want to do? Now, I have, over the last 4 months, met with a number of people who are hirers of that building, people who are chairing the over 50s club and other hirers of the building. And it's been a mixed bag. Some people have wanted the centre to be refurbished and reopened, and other people have been very clear that across the road, the Landon regeneration is taking place. They would never go to the Landon Centre as is, and therefore, why not bring the whole area up with a new building? You also have people who hire the building who say that their profits have been dwindling, that their usage of their centre has been dwindling. Now, given that there has been a lot of regeneration in the area, there's been a lot of new clientele in the area, it is surprising to hear hirers say that their business is going down, not up. So again, we need to understand a lot more from them on that. Can I just say on the issue of the land transaction, Mr. Clark said in his opening, he alleged that there wasn't any contact or discussion with the leaseholders. That is not true. And on page 30, the first paragraph details that there was a conversation with the trustee and with the association actually at the time with one of our officers who debated and discussed that. And it was agreed at that time that it was the right thing to do. This is not a smoking gun. This does not in any way contravene the full council resolution that was passed unanimously to protect that asset. And you know, I'm very clear, the community asset is protected. That site is fully protected. This administration has no plans whatsoever, no matter how many times letters are written to the Echo, we have no plans whatsoever to put anything other than a community centre that is on the same scale, if not bigger and better, than the current site that is there if the community say that that is what they wish. And Mr. Mayor, can I, sorry, Mr. I keep calling you Mr. Mayor, but Mr. Chairman, can I also finally say, it's old habits die hard. It would be so much better if we had the documentation here to be able to scrutinise some of this stuff. But the association, as I understand it, shredded it all when they left. So the documentation around hirers and around structures doesn't exist as far as I understand. Now, that was a decision of the association. And I want to end by saying this as well, Mr. Chairman. The keys to that centre were handed back late on a Friday. And it was in the depths of winter when COVID was rife. We were the #1 for infection rates in the country, a really, really difficult time for the council. Those staff and our council officers were absolutely heroic in the work that they did in that centre. When they went into that centre and they made that building safe and they did everything they could to support that association. The work that they did was grueling, pulling out the units that could then be sold to help pay off the association's debts. Debts, by the way, and liabilities that, again, I come back to it. How do you not have substantial cash, substantial reserves in the bank, given everyone should have been on furlough, given that there was no rent to pay, given that there was no money to be paid for major projects and major maintenance works? It is completely wrong, Mr. Chairman, that those officers have been made to feel unsafe going to work. It is completely wrong that they have been subjected on that Facebook page by Conservative councillors whipping it up, making their job completely unsafe. They have not wanted to go to work. It is completely wrong. This administration stands by them. They were brilliant for what they did. And it's, you know, I called on the chief executive at the time that he should be stamping that out. I stand by it tonight because it was bang out of order what was allowed to happen to those officers. They did great work and they will continue to do great work. And those officers only want the best for the Landon community. And they have my full support, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Now, what I'm going to do now, it's been over an hour and 15 minutes on this. I'm now going to move on. Otherwise, we're widening much further the debate, what I intended.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm going to read out, please don't interrupt anybody, please. I'm going to read out the recommendations.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I want to come back because I'd like to come back, please.
Councillor Dadds, no, I'm not listening.
Point of order.
I'm
Point of order.
Councillor Dadds, please mute yourself.
Can I raise a point of order, please?
No, I'm reading out the recommendations, please.
I'd like to raise a point of order, please.
Earlier on, you wanted to hear the recommendations, so
Yes,
please.
I want to raise a point of order, please.
The recommendations
Raise a point of order, please.
are, having considered the issues,
I'd like to raise a point of order,
relating
please.
to Landon Community Centre. This committee approves the initial consultation and engagement plan for the Landon Community Centre as set out in Enclosure 2 as amended to identify the needs of local residents, together with an independent survey of the building. We approve the expenditure of £4,500 for the delivery of the consultation. Officers explore alternative facilities for the Landon Activities Centre and other hirers on a temporary basis, and to bring a report back to this committee for decision if this results in additional expenditure for the council. That officers bring a further report to this committee with the outcome of the consultation, together with the result of the independent survey. The consultation, I'll go back to where I started. I'll add the additional one. If the consultation identifies the current building would not meet the identified needs of residents, would you refer the council to remodel the existing building or to demolish the existing building and construct a new centre designed to meet the future needs? All these qualifications, this will be subject to further consultation. And the question on, last question on page 39, to read, what do you feel the community most needs from a Landon Community Centre? Okay, is that quite clear?
I'd like to raise a point of order, please.
I will now take the vote. I'm taking the vote, Councillor.
I'd like to raise a point of order. Can the Democratic Support Officer please interject?
I'm in favour, Mr. Chairman.
Can the Democratic Support Officer interject?
Councillor Yacoub.
Raise a point of
In
order.
favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
Allows me to raise a point of order.
Councillor Henry.
Council's constitution allows me to raise a point
Councillor
of order.
Henry. You're muted. You're muted, Councillor Henry. You're muted.
I can't the consultation questions were as you asked them. I'd like clarity on that before I vote.
As they are on the pages, as they are on those pages, I've just amended one additional one, which I read out, and amended one to read, as I said. Okay.
I'd like to raise a point of order, please, in accordance with the Constitution.
I'm asking, please, I'm asking Councillor Henry how he wishes to vote.
And I said I'd like some clarity on what the consultation question was. I didn't hear any of that.
I apologise. Well, I apologise. If Councillor Dadds mutes himself, you'll probably be able to hear. That is to add the question. If the consultation identifies that the current building would not meet the identified needs of the resident, the person filling in the questionnaire, Would you prefer the council to remodel the existing building or to demolish the existing building and construct a new centre, all designed to meet future needs? This will be subject to a further consultation. So if that comes out as the main answer, there's a further consultation. And the other one was to amend the last question. What do you feel the community most needs from a Landon community centre?
Councillor Harrison, sorry, before you go on, can you just hear Paula Harvey, who's Head of Legal and Democracy, has indicated she'd like to speak?
Julie. Yeah, Chair, can we just ensure that all members are clear and what they're asked to vote?
You're not very clear, sorry. Paula.
Yeah, could we just ensure that all members are clear?
I can't hear you. I apologise. You're breaking up.
Just said, can we be clear that all members are clear they're being voted for?
Could you please provide?
Members be clear what they're voting for.
Thank you.
Yes, Jeff. What all members are voting for is what I read out. If Councillor Dad's muted himself, I would have been able to let people understand.
Well, the head of legal is here, and she should come in as head of
Will
legal.
you kindly stop?
I'm entitled to raise a point of order. I'm entitled to raise a point of order. I'm surprised that the head of legal is here.
I'm reading out so the head of legal can hear again. So do you mind muting yourself? Thank you.
I will.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge, because obviously,
Andrew, when I've read out so that the legal services.
Well, I was just trying to help you. That was all, because obviously we wouldn't want anything to be thrown into disarray when the public are watching and everything else. It is a lot of things, but as I said before, normally you have democratic services to support a chairman there to write down any amendments. Is it possible for maybe Julie or somebody just to quickly type it up and let members actually see it, so that they've got something in front of them, just for the sake of...
If you listen, it's fairly straightforward. If you've got the agenda in front of you, you see I'm not amending much at all. I'm deleting the words, consider the issues on the first one, because we've considered the issues. So saying, having considered the issues, raising the petition relating to Landon Community Centre, that's quite clear, yes? This committee then approves. These wordings are all still there on the agenda. Approves the initial consultation and engagement plan for the Landon Community Centre as set out in enclosure 2 and as amended to identify the needs of local residents. That's word for word except for 2 words. Then add together with an independent survey of the building. Recommendation 3 is as on the page. Recommendation 4 deletes the word notes and the word will. The rest is the same. So it reads that officers explore, not will explore, but that are not notes. Item 5 is delete the word notes and the word will. And it reads that officers bring a further report to this committee with the outcome of the consultation. That is there on the agenda and adds together with the result of the independent survey.
And that is clarity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then the 2 amendments I've read out, I think 5 times. No, 6 times. I made a note. 6 times is add the additional question. If the consultation identifies that the current building would not meet the identified needs of the residents, that's the person filling the form in, would you prefer the council to remodel the existing building or to demolish the existing building and construct a new centre designed to meet future needs? This will be subject to a further consultation. And the last question on page 39, which did read, what do you feel is most needed by the local community, is changed to read, what do you feel the community most needs from a Landon community centre?
Chairman, I get that, but Councillor Daz did raise a very good point. And Mrs. O'Shea did say remodel does include the prospect of demolition. And the community needs to have absolute clarity. We need to have
absolute clarity, Councillor Bagg, is because the wording says to remodel the existing building or to demolish.
No, the thing is...
I'm moving on. I'm taking the vote. Some members have voted. I'll go through it again so that we're quite clear. Paula, are you happy? You understand what I'm recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, once more.
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Yacoub.
In favour.
I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Councillor Henry.
I appreciate the efforts, but I'm sorry, I'm going to have to abstain, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Dadds.
I'm definitely voting against because you're
Okay.
not
Okay.
hearing me.
Is carried. That is carried. We now move on to item 6. We're now moving on to item 6, the youth zone update. On the youth zone update, Sam Nicholson here is to do a presentation on that. And should I add that it's a verbal update presentation, and at the presentation after it, the recommendation will be, now that students have returned, officers undertake further engagement with them through the schools. Sam, thank you.
Thank you. Bear with me while I just load the presentation to the screen.
Thank you.
Could you just confirm that you can see that for me?
Yeah, can you make it full screen? I think there's a slight, that's it, well done, thank you.
Are we there? Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm just going to take you through the outcome of the youth consultation. So this consultation was recommended at a meeting of the Neighbourhood and Public Spaces Committee back in August 2020. The consultation was undertaken between the 6th of November and the 13th of December. So it was running for 5 weeks, which is a good length of time for this type of consultation. The consultation was promoted through a number of channels. So we engaged with borough primary and secondary school head teachers via Zoom webinars. There was packs issued to all schools, including instructions on how to promote the survey. And this included social media graphics and posters with QR codes. So the children that were slightly older in the age group that we was looking to engage with could use their phones to access the survey. We issued press releases to launch the survey. We also produced videos that shared the consultation on the council's social media channels to encourage participation. We also used social media posts like Facebook and Twitter to target the audience that we were seeking to hear from. We created a web page dedicated to the survey that was easily accessible. We ran communication about the survey in the council's local newsletters, which have over 30,000 subscribers. And we ran internal communications on the survey across the council's internal platforms, including BASNet and Yammer. So there was lots of different approaches taken to make sure that we were reaching all those young people that we wanted to reach. So just a bit about survey participation. So the survey was completed by 296 participants. And the average time that it took them to complete the survey was approximately 7 minutes, 33 seconds. Now, the target population, which was 8 to 19-year-olds, we estimated that to be around 26,808 children, young people, and this was taken from the ONS projections for 2019. Now, based on that estimated population size, it would mean we'd need to reach a sample size of approximately 261 to give us a confidence interval of 5. So just a little bit about confidence intervals, just so you can have an understanding of why the figure of 296 is a good figure for this particular consultation. So based on that sample size, it's possible to assume that if each question were answered by the population as we know it to be, so 26,000, we can be sure that the same percentage of responses would be achieved for each question, plus or minus 5%. So if 80% of young people answered yes to a particular question, we can be confident that between 75% and 85% of young people would answer in the same way if asked again. But just an area of caution to add to that, when you're analysing the data, to achieve around 50%, achieving around 50% as there is a greater margin for error, whereas it's easier to assess extreme answers. So the closer you are to the mid-ground, the less confidence you can have in it. Whereas when the answers are much more to the extreme, so for example, if 80 or 90% of young people gave a particular answer, you can have much more confidence in that. We also had to be quite cautious about very small percentage responses. as they're a bit more difficult to make comparisons with. So, for example, if only one child gave a particular answer, it's less likely that other children would give the same answer. So, 1%, those types of responses are less accurate. Specific age group responses where participation was low in the survey, we just have to be aware of that. And other things to look at are influences that might have had an impact on the survey. So, for example, we know that when this consultation was taking place, we was obviously in the middle of COVID, and obviously that had some restrictions on schools affecting their ability to promote the survey. So, in summary, the survey findings give us a really good flavour of the thoughts and feelings of young people in the borough towards the questions posed in the consultation. We just need to be a bit careful not to generalise or draw specific conclusions from the data. So just the top level summary of results. This slide just provides a snapshot overview of the response rate just illustrated on a map. So you can see here on this heat map where the higher number of responses were received around the central point there where Basildon's highlighted in red. We received more responses from those areas, and obviously the lighter it gets, the lesser responses were received. And then just on response rates based on where participants live in the borough, you can see there's a good mix of representation of participants from across the borough. Basildon people living in Basildon were participated more in the survey than some other areas. You also note there's been a lower response rate from Billericay and Wickford when you look at under 11s, and Pitsea and Billericay in over 11s. Now, again, this could be down to some of those influencing factors that were going on at the time in terms of school closures and access to email, access to internet and things like that. So in response to the question, what do you do in the evenings and weekends? You can see there's quite a similar picture between under 11 responses and over 11 responses. Majority of them young people that responded saying that playing online, staying home were the predominant things they did in the evenings and weekends. And again, going to the park and open spaces came in around third, but there's not too significant a difference between the two different age groups. When asked about responses to which of the below activities would you be most interested in the under 11s, you can see here that the climbing wall, arts and crafts, boxing and martial arts, they all scored quite highly. You tend to see with the under 11s that the activities that they preferred were those where you're actually doing stuff. And this is slightly different when we move on to the over 11s, where the social aspects start to come in a little bit more. So a large open recreational area scored the highest on this particular one. But other activities did show similarities to the under 11s in terms of climbing wall still featured quite highly on there, among other things, including fully equipped gym. So some similarities, but just as the young people were getting older, you can see slightly more social side of things coming through. Responses to tick any of the follow which you think the introduction of a youth zone in the borough will help with. Again, under 11s, meeting friends, being fit and active, all scored quite highly, getting on with young people. There is a reference to my mental health, which is on there. Money management is obviously quite low, as you may expect with under 11s. But there are some similarities when we move over to the over 11s again. Meeting friends, my mental health scores much more highly on this side, but being fit and active, getting on with other young people. Again, you can see some similarities. I'll flick between the two just so you can see those, but there are those similarities in the two different age groups. And then responses to would you like to be a member of a youth zone? In both age groups, you can see there quite clearly that a number of young people did put forward they would like to be a member of the youth zone. So that was a quite a quick overview there, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have or run back over any slides that, that you wish to seek clarification on.
Thank you, Sam. That was very good. Can we come back off? Can you just stop sharing the screen, please, Sam?
Sure, no problem.
So we can see. I can see everybody. See most people, unless numbers have dwindled.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
as I said, I think that is quite a good presentation. It's a good indication of the popularity from those who responded on what a youth zone will provide, etc. I still feel that I would like to see some further engagement. That is why I'm proposing the recommendation that now that students have returned, officers undertake further engagement with them through the schools, because I'd like to get a further knowledge of what they want more. It's going ahead very, very well. And so far, I think it's quite clear that it's going to be very, very popular with the young people of the borough. Okay. I don't think we need to start analysing this response. I'll bring Councillor Dadds in because we know he's opposed to it.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't going to talk about my opposition in relation to the financing of it, but you've just made a comment which means that I feel that I need to respond. I wanted to talk about the presentation. Will you please show the respect to me?
Councillor Dadds, when you start showing respect to the chair, it might be reciprocal. If you'd like to ask some questions, you can carry on. Thank you.
Yes, I always show respect, and obviously it's earned. In relation to the officer's presentation, could I just ask this? I noticed that the population of Billericay, or the demographic, that it was, I think, only 6 participated. So what is the population of young people in Billericay? You took a totality figure for the borough. So is it representative, the 5, in the sense of the 5% or whatever you said at the beginning? Because clearly the consultation in Billericay was woefully inadequate, the response. I hear what Councillor Harrison says about going back outside the borough and trying to engage via the schools, but certainly the consultation, only 5 people in Billericay, only 6 people in Wickford. It may be an indication of one of the concerns I have, and I know you've got grandchildren, Mr. Chairman, in Wickford that may want to be part of youth services, but only 5 people in Billericay, 6 in Wickford might be an illustration that this is way too far away for many young people in our borough to actually access this service. So maybe if the officer can just tell me what the population is of that age group in Billericay and Wickford, and whether the numbers that participated actually represent that 5% that you say is satisfactory.
Sam.
Sure, Councillor. So we wouldn't have the population figures down to that level. So we wouldn't have it on a ward basis at that level. So I'd have to come back to you on a separate point if you wanted to know how many 8 to 19-year-olds live in Billericay, if that's okay.
Right, it's more on town, not ward, but on town. So the town of Billericay and the town of Wickford.
Yes, I can have a look and see if we can go down to a more granular level to see if we've got estimates for those towns for you, and I can come back to you separately on that. With regards to whether we can say the results are accurate because of the lower levels of representation from those wards, I think what is important to remember is that we was looking to engage young people who are aged 8 to 19 in the borough. So we wasn't targeting specific wards, it was across that age range. And what we were able to secure in that consultation was good representation from children who lived across the borough who met that age range group.
Mr. Chairman, could I come back, please?
Can I just say, in relation to Billericay, when I met with the head teachers, the head of Mayflower was one of the most positive ones for the youth zone in the borough.
Could I just come back, please?
When I finished, yes. And that is why I feel that because of COVID, it's been restricted in getting the number of young people I would like to have seen participate more, because it's not just Wickford and Billericay, Councillor Dadds. I think Pitsea was an area where I think we need to get more engagement. I want the engagement because the youth zone is going to go ahead subject to planning consent. This administration is fully behind the youth zone. So I want to make sure, whilst I'm chairman of this committee, that we further engage with young people across the borough through the schools, now they're back, and see we get more encouragement from them. and from the head teachers. Okay, anybody else wish to come in first?
I say, could I come back?
Yeah, I'm just finding if anybody else wishes to the first. Councillor Ferguson had his hand up.
Well, it's on that point that we're discussing.
Okay.
I'm happy for Councillor Dads to go first if you prefer, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
fair enough. Thank you. Dads.
Yes, the officers, you said that you feel that it's representative of children of 8 to 19 across the borough. However, would you agree with me that 5 individuals between 8 or children between 8 and 19 from the town of Billericay is not a representative, and that's why it is important to try to reach out to all the schools and the populace of Billericay as a town, because I think it has a population of about 30,000 or more. So between 18 and 19-year-olds, there's quite a lot of children.
Well, Councillor, all I can respond is that the task that was put forward for us was to engage with young people aged 8 to 19 within the borough. The purpose of the consultation wasn't to seek specific numbers from each of the towns within the borough. It was across the board for the borough. And as we secured, as I mentioned in the presentation, there are over 260 responses. That is representative of the population size of young people 8 to 19 in the borough. So that's the level at which we're looking at for this particular consultation.
I think you've answered my question.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank officers for all their work on the consultation, particularly at a challenging time launching a consultation with young people. And as we've seen, over and above the expected number of responses that we would expect to receive for a consultation of this type, and very strong responses from young people across this borough. What's a clear indication is that young people really want a youth zone in this borough. They're prepared to travel for it. They want to embrace it. They want to embrace the opportunities that it brings and enhances their life prospects. So I'm absolutely delighted that we have a report before us, and thank the officers for all their work in carrying out that consultation. And consultation doesn't just end at this particular point, as you've quite rightly said yourself, Mr. Chairman, that we go back out, we listen, and that this is a youth zone for young people. And it's absolutely right that we listen to them throughout the lifespan of the youth zone to see what activities they want us to provide. And I'm very pleased to see young people are as excited about this project as we are. And I'm very pleased that we as an administration are able to meet the ambitions of our borough's young people by providing the youth zone that they'd be proud of in the future. On relation to some of the attempted points by Councillor Dads to weave in and out of whether young people be prepared to travel. As many of you know, I am a youth worker, and I spoke to a colleague in another part of the country last week who described this youth zone that they had in their part of the country. And it turned out it was an on-site youth zone. And I asked them, are young people prepared to travel? They said, yes, they travel to it because they know it works. I asked, does it enhance the existing youth work offer for other youth work providers across their area? They said, yes, it enhances the youth work offer for other youth work providers across their area because it's a central point that young people can go to and feel safe, and allows other providers the opportunity to engage with young people on that particular site. So I think there is so much potential for this for our young people. And I'm so pleased by the responses, and I'm so pleased that we're able to meet their ambitions, which is exactly what all of us should come into politics to do.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I should also add, from my discussions with the people who operate the youth zone, they will operate continuous engagement with young people in order to try to improve as they go along, because they start with one group and the ones who come, and you try to develop that as you go along. So I think it's wonderful. Well, I'm now going to take the vote on the recommendation that now that students have returned, officers undertake further engagement with them through the schools. I think that's quite clear. You unmute yourself, please. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Yacoub.
In favour.
Councillor Henry.
In favour.
Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Councillor Dads.
In favour.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item 7, the consultation on the proposed development of energy recovery facility on land to the south of Archers Field Close, Pitsea. That's on pages 41 to 52. I've got Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Reid here who wish to speak on this item, and I'll call them in after members of the committee have spoken. Mrs. Lyons, are you taking this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the report. If there's any any technical questions, I think Martin Howlett's on to technical questions. Obviously, it's a bit technical for me in terms of the actual combustible side of things. These things are normally dealt with by just delegated to the head of planning, but obviously this matter was of a significance to the borough as a whole, and therefore the matter was brought to your committee for members to review the consultation response before it was sent to the local planning authority for waste, which is Essex County Council. I've got nothing further to add.
Thank you, Christine. The recommendation is on page 41 that members agree the proposed response to planning application ESS 12020 BAS as set out in enclosure 2 in relation to the development of an energy recovery facility and associated infrastructure on land to the south of Archersfield Close, Burnt Mills Industrial Estate, and that letter is on pages 49 to 51. I should add that the reason it's here tonight is I think the consultation closes on Friday, if I'm correct.
That's correct, yes.
So the letter is there, our response. I'll bring in members first of all. Councillor Ferguson, as indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I speak tonight as a member of this committee, but also as a councillor for Pity North West. And this proposal does sit within my ward, and members will be aware of the motion that I brought to full council in September of last year, where I set out my concerns, having listened to the views of my residents on this proposal. And I stand by those concerns. I remain incredibly concerned about the potential increase in traffic that we'll see within the area, an area that, as we discussed 2 meetings ago at this council, Mr. Chairman, of the proposal of the congestion charge because of poor air quality within this area. And if this proposal is accepted by Essex County Council, it will only increase the poor air quality within the area. We have 2 local schools that are within a couple of 100 yards of this particular proposal and residential locations. And as Mrs. Lyons has outlined in her letter, if approved tonight in response to Essex County Council, I'm particularly concerned about the health challenges that has been identified, and that's been very articulately put forward. So, Mr. Chairman, I stand with my residents in their opposition to this proposal. It shouldn't go any further than it currently has done, and I urge Essex County Council to put a stop to this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Dadds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple points I wish to raise, and it may be also that a point of clarification from the head of planning. When Councillor Ferguson raises the point that he wants Essex County Council to stop this as soon as possible, and maybe the planning officer can assist me. This is an application to the Waste Authority at Essex County Council. So it's a private company or an organisation making an application to the County Council, for which we are a consultee. So we feed into that application process. So Essex County Council can't stop someone making an application, can't stop and choose not to determine an application, as I understand it. And an application has to be judged by the planning authority on planning terms. Now, of course, I think every councillor in Basildon has said, no, we do not want this in our borough. We are all on one in that. And I agree with the officer's letter, and I think we should make it even more forceful that we want this to be rejected. However, I'm concerned that a number of comments have come and been made by Councillor Callaghan that this is a conservative decision, a conservative, in effect implying it's like a conservative policy, and it is not. In essence, it is an application made by a company to the Essex County Council, who is Conservative controlled, and as a planning authority have to determine that application. I obviously urge the planning authority to reject the application made by a private company, and I think that we all agree that we do not want this facility in our town and borough. I also, perhaps the officer will clarify, Councillor Callaghan has suggested previously that there were some discussions or the Conservatives knew about this previously and didn't discuss it. Now, I certainly, and if the planning officer can clarify, I certainly have never been communicated about this on a pre-application as a Conservative member. And I know that Councillor Baggott is here. Maybe he will be able to clarify the same. And I don't believe he was consulted. I understand during PERDA last year, a letter was received by the Chief Executive or the Council.
Councillor Dadds, I'm going to stop you. I'm not going to have a debate on tit and tat, who said this and who said what and what was reported, and then ask an officer of the council to sort of mediate between your accusations. I'm not having that.
Can I carry on then? Can I carry on?
What I'm going to say, no, as I said, you show me respect. You said you would, so please do. Is that this is a letter, a planning response, and all tonight all we have to do tonight is approve or not approve this response by the Chief Planning Officer, Head of Planning, to the County Council, so the County Council can consider what we're saying here tonight in this letter on behalf of the council when that planning application is dealt with by them as a waste authority. That's perfectly clear. That's perfectly clear. So I'm not going to get into a debate and who said what at various times, who did what at various times.
Okay. Can I come back then?
I'm speaking.
Well, when can I come back?
You can come back in a moment, yes. But first of all, I'm going to. Two other members have sat there very quiet for nearly.
I haven't finished speaking.
Councillor Mackenzie.
I haven't finished speaking though. You
for a moment. You have for the moment.
You interrupted me. I stopped to show you respect.
It's the chairman's prerogative, David.
Yeah, and I stopped. And I've asked, can I come back, please?
Can I
come back, please?
Councillor Reid first, then Councillor.
Come back, please.
Councillor Reid, then Councillor.
The head of legal.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm entitled to heard. Please be spoken.
I am here tonight to represent some of my residents who have contacted me regarding this proposed development.
I am speaking, and I should not be stopped.
Councillor Dadds.
I'm sorry. You can make a point of order. You stopped me.
Councillor Dadds, every time I have a committee meeting, you wish to control the meeting. You're not going to. Please be quiet. Councillor Reid.
No, I'd like to speak, please.
I'll call you later on this evening. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here tonight to represent some of my residents who have contacted me regarding this proposed development. As an Essex County Councillor for Pitsea Division and also as a Borough Councillor for Pitsea North West, and I've lived in Pitsea for 40 years, so I very much care about the area. Waste to energy facilities are promoted as clean energy plants, but in truth, while these schemes, which claim to be environmentally conscious in operation, almost never are. An investigation, some people might have watched it on Channel 4 Dispatches programme, and they were investigating into where our rubbish goes and the role played by energy from waste incineration plants, has found that millions of tonnes are simply being burned after they are collected. This system of incineration does not encourage recycling, reuse, or waste prevention. In the past, objections to incineration largely centred on air quality and public health concerns, but the focus has now shifted. Today, we are looking at emissions, and we need to insist that the green claims of the incineration industry are subject to scrutiny. We have all heard of carcinogenic dioxins, which are extremely harmful to the environment and to humans. And I have residents complaining about the air being polluted by dust. This is known as fly ash, which is caused by systems being installed to clean the dangerous flue ash. This can inadvertently create the ideal conditions for molecules to form and escape into the air, which then condenses to create the ash into the atmosphere, which people see as dust. This plant, as Councillor Ferguson has alluded to, if allowed to go ahead, will be built in short range of several schools and also Northlands Park, which is used by many people. The plant would also be next to the area, which is already subject to a government directive to improve air quality, and on which the government has already threatened to bring in congestion charge. This proposal is completely unsuitable for Pitsea. We have already had a failed recycling plant dumped on Basildon, and we definitely do not need another one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I bring in Councillor Mackenzie, who sat there, I think he's sitting there very patiently.
Thank you. Firstly, while it is not in my ward, everyone in Pitsea breathes the same air, and Pitsea South East is affected by this. And this area also acts as a gateway into Pitsea, where the residents I serve will use. Now, first of all, I want to address the issue around lorry movements. It is previously mentioned by the applicant that they think this will reduce the lorry movements. I don't actually think this is true, because what the incineration will do will dramatically increase the capacity of waste that can go to that plant. Rather than sitting there being stored and having to take away, they can bring it in, put it straight into the incinerator. So they could potentially increase the amount of waste they're taking, increasing capacity, and that will increase vehicle movements. I mean, the other thing I look at is the number of vehicles. So assuming we had a lorry size of that can take 32 tonnes, that's almost 4,700 lorry movements a year going through that road into the Coulthard Road area. And these are quite big lorries, putting out lots of pollution. And this is already identified as an area with traffic pollution as an issue. So this worsen the air quality for the residents of Pitsea. This is something I think we can all agree that we oppose. And I hope that the planning application is rejected, and I will be putting my case forward to have it rejected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I've got Councillor Yacoub next, then Councillor Baggott and Councillor Smith. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I think there is no doubt that we need to object to this development of a waste plant in Pitsea, especially given the air quality issues we've had in regards to the A127 already. We need to put the health of our residents first, and as we know, energy from waste facilities emit emissions of nitrogen oxide. Given that this facility will be within 200 metres of residential properties, and the fact that it is the least sustainable waste management option using outdated technology and working against the principles of waste management, I believe that every single member of this committee must oppose this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baggott, then Councillor Smith and Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Chairman. I do try to be minimalist at meetings that I'm not actually a committee member of. But I do think that because it is important to be transparent, that if anything is covered where there isn't the ability to rebut, I think it is quite important to make sure that the public get a full picture. And it was raised about the issue that had been touted around social media, that somehow the Conservatives knew about this in administration and were made aware. And I just want to, for the record, refute that 100%. And to reassure the public and members that at no point while we're in administration did we receive any form of briefing or any form of officer input that this was something that was in the offing. And I just want to state that for the public record. I mean, what I also state is I would hope that we would be voting against this because of all the reasons that are stated and quite eloquently by members on both sides of the fence. We have always been in opposition to the waste plant there. When I was elected in Pitsea, I spent a fruitless 4 years fighting the Coulthard Road waste plant for a lot of reasons that have been elocuted on today. And that's been proven to be the right decision, that we should have done that. I also, again, for the record, and I know this irks Councillor Callaghan somewhat, but when we found out about it, when we were made aware, we worked quick out the blocks in making sure we got a petition up to gauge the strength of feeling, and that strength of feeling was obvious, and therefore it is a no-brainer that we would be objecting to this tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question to yourself, well, to Christine Loynes through yourself, because obviously it's very important people object based on planning law. We can debate about Essex County Council's interest in that or not, but the important thing is, how do the public challenge this in planning law? So my question to Christine Loynes is, what reasons could the Mineral and Waste Committee at Essex County Council use to refuse this planning application?
Okay. Christine, I'll bring you in now before you forget the question.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith, they are set out in our response, actually. So if your residents and anybody wants to understand how they can object as well, what I suggest you do is that you, the letter is actually on the agenda, and you make sure that those residents actually have access to the letter, because the letter basically sets out the reasons that it should be that we wouldn't see it as an acceptable location. And actually, to be honest, you've all said the same things: traffic, noise, pollution, and Councillor Reid was excellent in her the talk about the particulates and also the carcinogenic nature of those particulates as well. So either listening to tonight's broadcast or actually just give them access to that letter, because the letter has been drafted by obviously Martin Howlett and Charles Sweeney from my team, using both the environmental health background and also the planning background to come up with a reasoned position that we've put in that letter, which is short and to the point.
Thank you, Christine. It's on page 49 and 51, Councillor Smith.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just a very quick question to yourself. Could something be put on the council's social media channels to pick up what Christine Loynes has said? Because we've got to make it as simple and easy as we can for the public. Because the more public representations, the more chance we've got of winning.
Well, I'll ask the Democratic Services is present if they could bring that the attention of the comms team in the morning, because they only have until Friday to respond. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christine Loynes is correct in that it is short and sweet. Here we go again when it comes to dumping on Pitsea. I find the comments earlier strange that, of course, when a developer comes forward with a proposal in Basildon Town Centre, it is, of course, the Basildon Council Administration's proposal. But when there is a proposal to the Planning Committee at Essex County Council, it's got nothing to do with the Conservative Party. Pull the other one, Mr. Chairman. And the reason I say that is because we know, because we previously wrote to the Chief Executive of Essex County Council, that there is a clear timeline that puts in black and white when the council was notified. It was notified just before the 2019 elections. But what happened, and this is what I would argue strongly we should be putting into this letter tonight. Essex County Council made a decision. We're criticised all the time here as an administration that we don't do enough consultation on development. We have insisted on public pre-apps for every single development coming forward in our town centre. There was no public pre-app that took place on this incinerator. That should have happened. The residents of Pitsea Northwest and Pitsea Southeast should have had the opportunity to have a full pre-app so that they were able to put their comments in. Not just a bland consultation. It should have been chapter and verse showing exactly what was going to happen. Somebody at County Hall decided that that would be too damaging to the administration and that shouldn't happen. So we should have got to the bottom of exactly who it is that did that. I think one of the key things in this letter is it runs over page 49 and 50, where it talks about the proximity, dealing with the waste in proximity. I was elected, I beat Councillor Baggott in 2012 and was elected. There's a pattern that has been played out over the last 10 years of me beating Councillor Baggott. I suspect it will happen again in May. But when I beat him in 2012, part of the reason that we did it was because we looked at this. And The 2013 plant, we were promised by the Conservative County Council that if Basildon, and particularly Pitsea, took a waste plant in the south, that the county, the Conservative-run county, would build the second one in the north of the county, in Braintree or in Colchester or in Uttlesford. They've gone back on that promise. And I said in 2013, they will go back on this promise, and they have. And so Councillor Dadds is wrong. They could have brought this to planning committee a lot earlier. It's sat there. The timeline, the chronology is clear. They've sat on this and sat on this so that they cannot now bring it until June after the election. So they want people to go and vote. And here's the madness of the situation. The chair of that committee is a councillor from Tendering, right? He's over an hour's drive away from Pitsea, right? And the representative on the committee, our local county councillor in Pitsea, one of them, apart from the brilliant Pat Reid, the other one lives in Dorset. He upped and left and went to Dorset, Stephen Hillier. So we don't have people who live locally, except for Councillor Reid, who are going there to advocate for us when it comes to this. So I just think it's completely wrong when we think about that proximity argument. The second thing I would say, and boy, has this come to fruition during the COVID pandemic, that the second paragraph on page 50 talks about the health impacts. And I have a real concern about this. I've been banging the drum about public health in Pitsea since I got elected in 2012. And one of the key things I've been banging the drum about is respiratory disease. Our hospital deals with more cases of respiratory disease than it does nearly anything else, because we have a much higher prevalence of respiratory disease in Pitsea than we do anywhere else. Now, this committee has looked at the local delivery pilot, the Sport England work and all the rest of it, because that has come up previously. We've seen during COVID how susceptible people in the poorest parts of our borough can be when they have poor respiratory disease. How can it possibly be in the public health interest to allow a second waste plant in this vicinity, which will undoubtedly worsen the air pollution and increase incidences of respiratory disease in Pitsea Northwest? That cannot be allowed to happen. So I think we should be making reference here. The county council is, after all, supposedly in charge of the public health. I think we should be making reference to those issues around respiratory disease, particularly in the health impact assessment there. The other thing to say is around the noise and the dust. I speak to Burnt Mills just literally an hour before this committee. I was on the phone to residents living off Burnt Mills Road, and they were telling me about the dust. And I know it affects your ward as well, Mr. Chairman, where it flies over to Wickford Park, and you get a lot of the dust. And so the businesses are having to forever clean their cars because of what is being spewed out onto their windshields and onto their driveways. That is completely wrong, and it's going to get worse. And we were told in 2013 there would not be lorry movements up Burnt Mills Road, that all of the lorry movements would be on Coulthard Road. Well, what's happened? Burnt Mills Road now has got lorry after lorry after lorry hammering it down. And for whatever reason, the county council will not take the highways issues on Burnt Mills Road seriously. And there has already been deaths of people on Burnt Mills Road. It is a huge problem, and this will only make it worse, Mr. Chairman. And the other thing I would say, the final thing I would say, if I can, this planning meeting should happen in Pitsea. So we should be really clear. It shouldn't be happening up at County Hall, where people can hide behind Zoom calls. They can hide behind everything else. In June, we are on a roadmap to come out of these restrictions. That committee should take place in Basildon, so that local people from Pitsea can go and they can make it abundantly clear to the county council, the Conservative County Council, not again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I'm now going to take the recommendation. We've had 8 speakers and there's a lot of business to get through tonight. It's quite clear the letter is self-explanatory to the County Council. The recommendation is on page 41.
You said that I would come back in.
Members agree the proposed response to plan
You
application
said, Mr. Chairman, that I would be called again.
20/20 BAS as set out in the enclosure
I
number
raised this
2,
as a dispute
relating
again.
to the development of an energy
Challenge it by judicial
recovery
review
association.
because I'm not being allowed to speak.
Councillor Dadds.
I'm being silenced.
I would have thought, Councillor Dadds, with
You
your
said-
name up there as a JP and a barrister, you would know better than keep interrupting.
And I know my constitutional rights to
the
speak.
judges in court.
And I know my constitutional rights to speak.
I've had 8 speakers. I've got a lot of business to get through tonight. This committee has, and you continually interrupt. Please don't.
You said you would call me back. You said you would call me back. You said I would be called back.
The recommendation is on page 41 that members agree the proposed response to plan application ESS 120/20 BAS as set out in enclosure number 2 in relation to the development of an energy recovery facility and associated infrastructure on land to the south of Archersfield Close, Burnt Mills Industrial Estate. Unmute yourselves, I'll take the vote. I'll start at the top. Everyone's moved around again. Councillor Yakub.
In favour.
Councillor Henry.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Councillor Dadds.
In favour.
And myself in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mrs. Lyons, perhaps in correspondence with Councillor Dadds, you're giving the details he asked for about the previous conversations or not with the County Council prior to early in 2019, so that he understands what the situation was. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 9. I'm sorry, item 8. I'm jumping the gun myself now. Item 8. It's the Sports and Physical Activity Development Grant Scheme. It's just an update. I asked for the update to be on the agenda purely to indicate what we're doing with the sports grants and the physical activity ones. This only covers this last year, but previously we've made many more as well, as Councillor Blake knows full well. He knows as well as I know now that we consider them, we look at them, some we agree, some we don't, but we talk to Steve Mitchell and other people. So it's not just a judgment of myself or Councillor Blake when he was chairman. It's a judgment of a variety of people who have come to these conclusions. Tracy is here. Oh, Grant, do you want to? I'm looking for faces now. Grant, I think it's self-explanatory, but what we do, I think, is brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, on that basis, I'll try and zip through it. So, yeah, you've given a helpful indication there. So, importantly, it's a Sport and Physical Activity Development Fund. We changed that from a sport fund to include physical activity at this committee probably a year or so ago to recognise the different ways in which people stay active, and of course that being the principal outcome of this around people's health and well-being. So some people love sport, some people don't. Some people keep physically active in other ways. So we changed it in that way, and I think that's paying dividends. So at the moment, it's a fund of just over £9,500 each year, and that helpfully helps fund individuals living within the borough and not-for-profit making clubs and groups and organisations as well, whose membership is specifically open to people or is open to people in the borough, of course. Clearly, personal sport and physical activity development or sport and physical activity provision across the borough is of huge importance to the organisation. You'll see on the report there are a number of objectives that we look for the scheme to achieve, principally to enhance the quality of life and provide a range of sports events and activities for residents to participate in and attend. To improve and enhance social cohesion through sport and physical activity, counteracting the isolation of individuals, seeking to support personal development, education, professional skills and creative abilities, so investing in our athletes and those that want to participate. And importantly, I think it helps build the image and reputation for quality, innovation and enterprise that the council has in relation to this field. So the way it works is individuals can apply for up to £500 and clubs and groups as well as organisations can apply for up to £1,000 So during so far during 2021, as we are coming to the end of that now, 17 applications have been received. As Councillor Harrison said, with our colleagues in Active Basildon, which is made up by very many partners and volunteers who have a strong track record and desire to improve sport and physical activity in our borough. 10 of these were successfully awarded as meeting the criteria, meaning that we've been able to give out about £7,100 over this year to 9 clubs and 1 individual. It's been an important year this year. Of course, much of the activity that we would normally see has been made more difficult through the COVID pandemic. That said, we've also seen the rise of people participating in sport and physical activity in a way we've not seen previously. Certainly in the start of the pandemic, the walking, running, cycling across the borough certainly seemed to increase on a large amount, and that was very, very welcome. But for many of the clubs that are doing positive work in our borough and the sports people, it's been a hard year. So we've been really trying to use our influence and the fund this year to help mitigate from some of the challenges that COVID has thrown up. And that has seen a greater rise in virtual training sessions and our ability to support people to do those, therefore, helping them gain additional materials of equipment to enable new or continued participation. That could be in all sorts of different ways. And what we've got here is a list of different things, all of the things that we've distributed the funding to this year, which I won't go into each one, but if I can help, or Tracy, we're lucky to have on the call tonight, can help and answer any questions, we certainly will do. But there are some examples here, some of our work with St Teresa's Primary School and helping them buy some additional resources and online physical and running online physical activity sessions or education sessions when their school was closed. Brilliant work as ever by Maru Karate Kai, helping them set up weekly online training sessions for 20 participants for a 6-month period. And they particularly were working with local schools to identify those most in need and those most impacted with the loss of physical activity through COVID considerations, and also helping to support volunteers with upskilling and the like. Supporting the cricket club in Basildon Pitsea with they would normally as being a summer sport, normally go inside to do fun cricket, but not been able to do so this year. So we help them with their artificial playing surface so they can carry on playing. Small pieces of work in the grand scheme of things, but hugely important in being able to allow communities to carry on staying active in a really difficult time. So yes, the pandemic has presented many additional challenges, but the scheme has continued to be effectively delivered against its objectives once again this year. And we look forward to the government's roadmap and being able to get sport and physical activity back being played again. And the fund will be there to support that, I'm sure. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. Councillor, getting used. Can I just add that before in the previous year, which wasn't on this report, we changed this to physical activity as well as sport, and I thought that was important. And just an example is prior to the pandemic, we met with the Friends of Lake Meadows to introduce them to people who wanted to be the Friends of Whitfield Memorial Park, to work out how it worked. And as a result of that, both made physical activity applications to this fund and were successful. And the improvements both those are made, and you'd be useful in obtaining equipment to carry out their physical activity in the park. So it's useful to the borough as well. I think some very good examples. I think the report is quite explanatory. I'll bring Councillor Blake in because he did this before I did, very successfully. So I know some of those who got it then as well, Councillor Blake. And then we just need to note the report. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Grant, for that short intro. I hate that happen if you have a long one, but well done. Yeah, this is really great news. And I have to say, I will say this: I didn't think of it, but bringing it to a committee like this is an exceptional way of promoting it. We used to in the old days, and Tracy, I know this, we used to sort of ask them to go to the press once they've got it and once they've achieved something. And some did, but sometimes the press didn't necessarily print everything, as always. So this is a good way of getting over what Basildon Council are doing and how they're representing the people in sport and everything else in the borough. So it's been going on donkey's years, and spent many a good afternoon sitting down with Tracy going over the applications in some depth. Some of them we had a good grin about, because it's, there are some funny ones. I always remember we also done an awful lot for the disabled people over at Swanmead. Betty Jeffries was the person that we dealt with there, done an awful lot of work regarding it there. So it's served, been going a long time, but it does seem to be running nice and smoothly in your capable hands, and continuing what we started. But yeah, all good news. Well done.
I think it's good. It's good. One of the ones we've helped out, of course, I think is Emily Luscott, the young girl who's the racing driver grant.
Yep, she's had grants in the past, yes.
And it's helped her, and she's becoming very successful. So small grants like that in the first place have enabled some people to achieve more. And there's a couple in the previous year which weren't on here of individuals, which I thought were very, very rewarding for the people who got the grant. So I'm pleased that we as a council can help those. And I know Councillor Blake did likewise before. So the report is for noting. We don't need a vote. It's noting the report. But obviously, there's applications can come in, can't they? Okay, can we move on then to the next item, which is arts and culture across the borough. When I say across the borough, the report, if you like, indicates arts and culture. It's a rather a retrospective one in terms of what has been going on in the borough. One of the two of the things that are planned, mainly in the Basildon Town Centre, but a lot of that art is coming under the Arts and Culture on the Town Centre Revival Committee. So on this part, funding has gone into the budget now for an Arts and Culture Development Officer, I think we're going to call them, with £50,000 initially to support arts and culture stuff in the other 4 towns across the borough: Billericay, Pitsea, Landon and Whitford. I think what's gone in the Basildon Town Centre with the events, Newtown Sounds, etc., has been very successful. Money is in there. I'm now told that, surprisingly, Newtown Sounds, if we're going to organise that now comes under this committee, as does the Wick Fest, which we want to promote later on this year. On the recommendations, before you discuss it, on the recommendations on page 59, I'm adding a fourth one. Yes, a fourth one. That officers bring forward plans for the Newtown Sounds and the Wick Fest activities to the June committee of NMPS. But that is why I've included on the work programme arts and culture for that particular item. So basically, the recommendations are the committee notes the range of artistic and cultural activities taking place across the borough and plans to further enhance existing good practice. It approves the introductions of a cultural development officer to engage the community in Billericay, Landon, Pitsea and Wickford. It offers us explore the opportunities to learn from projects to be delivered as part of the Basildon Consortium that can be implemented in other town centres in the borough. And I think, Grant, we're looking at that in terms of what we do in empty shops, etc., on things like that. And I think it's important. And I think, having persuaded my friends on the administration that Billericay, Wickford, Landon and Pitsea deserve some arts and cultures, because each of those towns have got their own identities, and in some ways, not Billericay so much, that's made quite seriously retained its identity. Wickford has lost its identity somewhat. Pitsea has, and I think Landon has. So it's how arts and culture of those places can bring people back together, and I think that's important, and that's why there's money in the budget for this, and I'm hoping the committee will approve it. Okay, it's open. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, fully support and endorse this report this evening. Arts and culture is so important, and if we look at the agenda tonight, the previous item looking at grants for sports, and you mentioned quite rightly in that item just how important sport is on individuals' lives. Arts and culture is just as important to bringing the community together for individual well-being. And I think the arts and cultural coordinator position, I think, is so important. I think the initiatives that we're rolling out across the borough are so important to do that as well. So fully endorse and support this proposal this evening, Mr. Chairman.
I think I should have added one thing, because I didn't want Grant to make another long speech, but I did forget to mention Estuary 2021. And I saw a big piece, I think I was on Essex Live on the internet today about it, where they've now started promoting it. And I was disappointed that on the promotion, it mentioned places in Kent on the estuary, it mentioned Southend, but it didn't mention Basildon, where we want to do something in Wat Tyler Park. I assume that Wat Tyler Park is still on the agenda, Grant.
Yeah, very much, Councillor. That's disappointing to hear, but yes, it very much is one of the central delivery areas.
Yeah. And at the moment, that is still down from 22nd of May to the 13th of June, but obviously, if that changes, because it should have taken place last year. So that is a big event for the borough and in Wat Tyler Park. Okay. Right. The recommendations I've read out. If everyone is happy with those recommendations, on page 59 with one I added.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, would you just mind repeating the one that you just added? Sorry, I fully support it, but if you wouldn't mind repeating the one that you've just added.
The one I just added, yes, that officers bring forward plans for the Newtown Sounds and the Wickfest activities to the June committee of NMPS. That is enable them because we're talking about possibly events in August time. Mr. Brace, who's still on the call, I think he's got some ideas of how we can do some of these things, but I don't want him to elaborate tonight, otherwise we'll be here till about 11:30. But he's in the process of appointing a, what do we call him, a cultural development officer. Am I not correct, Mr. Brace?
You are. You're absolutely right, Councillor. Can you hear me? Oh, no, my mic's up there. Sorry. Yes, you are, Councillor. Apologies. My mic was behind my head. Yeah, apologies for that.
No, okay, that's fine. Okay, I'll take the vote then on the recommendations on page 59 plus with the additional one. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub.
In favour.
Councillor Henry.
In favour.
Councillor Dadds.
In favour.
And I'm in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Now we come to another major item, the play area review update. Recommendations are on pages 67 and 68. It's just on item 3 on page 68. I think you need to delete the words subject to approval of the capital funding at full council because the capital funding has been approved. Okay. The play area is there. I'm now going to ask, I think Tracy Bromley's on the call to do a presentation. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. So just bear with me just for a second, just while I share my screen.
So just going to say, while Tracy's preparing this to share the screen, can I congratulate the officers of the council on the work that has gone into this play area review. It's been going on. I took it over they were just starting really looking at it when I took over as chairman. The work going on since then has been really fantastic. But I do know that from 2015 onwards, that under Councillor Blake, who did start looking at a review because we hadn't had one since 2006, and this is now the position we're in actually being what I view as proactive with our play areas and planning for the next 10 years rather than being too reactive in just dealing with something when it comes up. So there's a good capital funding in the budget for the 10-year programme. Tracy, I'll leave it to you.
can everybody see my screen?
No.
Oh, hold on, bear with me.
Oh, no, we can't, Tracy. That,
Can't see it. Oh,
oh, that says Zoom and coronavirus. Wash your hands.
oh,
Tracy, we're
okay.
seeing your desktop, but not the
Oh,
presentation.
you can see my desktop. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay, sorry, everybody. Apologies. Let me just put it into full screen mode for everybody so everybody can see it clearly.
Thank you.
Okay, so this presentation is going to provide the committee with the findings from the play review consultation, the community consultation that was undertaken earlier or late last year and early this year. So it was actually undertaken for a period of 6 weeks, and it ran from the 16th of December through to the 31st of January. So this the community consultation was undertaken following completion of the consultation with ward members back sort of last year, and the findings of that those sessions were presented to the committee on the 25th of November, and the headline findings from the consultation with ward members has been included as an enclosure to the report for tonight's meeting, just as a reminder. So we received a total of 948 responses to this community consultation. So this is a good response, and it's above the confidence levels required to ensure that we can be satisfied that the results are scientifically significant and provide a good representation of responses for a borough-wide consultation exercise. So if we take a look at the postcode data received from respondents, you can see that there was a good percentage of responses from most postcode areas within the borough. However, you will notice that the response rate is lower for both the Wickford and Pitsea areas. So of the 948 responses that were received, 90.8% of respondents state that they currently use play areas within the borough. And with regard to current usage, this slide shows the top 10 play areas according to the frequency that they were mentioned in the responses to the question that we asked respondents to provide details about the play areas that they currently use. Lake Meadows is the most frequently mentioned play area, followed by Wat Tyler and Gloucester Park. So the council has adopted a quality, not quantity approach to the provision of play within the borough. Now, this approach dates back to before the current play strategy was adopted back in 2006. So respondents were asked here to what extent they agree with that approach. So this result is encouraging, as 57% either agree or strongly agree, as opposed to 22.3% who disagree or strongly disagree with the approach regarding quality, not quantity, with regard to the provision of play within the borough. A large part of this consultation has provided us with data about what's important to people about play within the borough. So this question was broken down into a number of different elements, and respondents were asked to rate each element according to its importance to them. So the first chart here on the left-hand side relates to the quality of play, and the responses show overwhelmingly that this element is very important to people, with 90.5% of respondents either agreeing or strongly agreeing. So this further reinforces the previous result regarding the council's quality, not quantity approach with regard to the provision of play. Inclusivity on the right hand side, this is also important to people. 86.8% of respondents either agree or strongly agree. Sites that are well used, this is important to people as well. 75% either agree or strongly agree with that. Sites that also have access to the natural environment, for example, sites that have trees and wildflowers and long grasses, etc. That's important to people as well, with 75.8% agreeing, either agreeing or strongly agreeing with that. Community consultation regarding design and equipment. That's important to people. That's 83% of people agree or strongly agree with that. Sites that meet the play needs of different ages. That's also important, with 93.5% agreeing with that. And availability for open space for ball games. That's also proven to be important. 79.8% either agree or strongly agree. And safety regarding access routes and lighting, 94.1% of respondents agree that that is important to them. So the final element of importance that respondents were asked to rate was whether play areas should be close to home. Now, 89.1% agree that this is important to them. So it's the council's aspiration that residents should be within a short walk of a play area. And when we move to the next slide, this question relates to how far people would be willing to walk to visit a high quality play area. This is further supported in the fact that 66.1% of respondents who would travel on foot state that they would be willing to walk a distance of 15 minutes to visit a high quality play area. So this is important as a proposed play review programme seeks to ensure that this is the case for most residents. So in order to try and gain an understanding of the views regarding specific proposals for the future provision of particular play areas within the borough, respondents were invited to comment on both play areas proposed for investment and those proposed for removal. So this aspect of the consultation was broken down into the 5 towns within the borough. So respondents were asked to select the location that was most relevant to them. So Basildon, Billericay, Landon, Pitsea or Wickford. And the data that has been collected regarding this question largely corresponds with the postcode area data that was seen on the previous slide or previously mentioned slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the response rate from the Pitsea area was particularly poor, and this is reinforced here with only 4% of respondents selecting the Pitsea as the location that is most relevant to them. So this is a particularly low response rate, and as a result of that, it's felt that further engagement with the local community in the Pitsea South East, Pitsea North West and Vange wards regarding the proposed play review programme would be beneficial. So overall, the data collected regarding the proposed investment for play within the borough has been very, very positive. As a result of data collected regarding the rationalisation of play areas, a number of amendments to the proposed programme have been suggested. Now these have been noted in the report. However, I'll just go through them quickly now for you. So Great Gregory Small, that's in the Nethermain ward, and Mayland Path in Langdon Park. So we received a number of comments regarding the removal of those particular sites. So it suggested that they could be retained, and if that's the case, then investment should be considered in those areas in order to bring them up to a good play value. Methersgate and Barrington Gardens, both play areas are in the Friends ward. So we received a number of comments with regard to the removal of those play areas. Both of these sites have received recent member investment. And as a result, it was suggested that the play equipment at those sites could be retained for the remainder of its lifespan, which is approximately 8 years, and then further local consultation should be undertaken regarding removal at the appropriate time. Duke's Place and Sandringham Road, that are both in the Langdon Park ward. These two play areas are situated very close to each other, and the proposed 10-year programme suggests the removal of one of these and investment in the other. Comments that we'd received from the consultation were inclusive, and it's therefore suggested that further local consultation is undertaken regarding the future provision of those sites. So as part of this consultation, consultation was also undertaken with the town, village and parish councils regarding the proposals in the 10-year play review programme. And as a result of consultation with Billericay Town Council, they've expressed an interest in taking over responsibility for 9 play areas in the Billericay West Ward that have been proposed for removal in the proposed 10-year programme. This report seeks authorisation to enable officers to explore that option with the Town Council and also with other village and parish town councils as appropriate regarding play areas that have been proposed for removal within their geographical areas of responsibility. So the financial implications of the suggested amendments are set out on this slide. So Great Gregory Small that was proposed for removal during year 3 of the programme. So if the proposal is approved and this site is no longer removed but invested in, then the removal cost would need to be replaced with the investment cost for this site. So the removal cost for this site is estimated to be around £6,000. Investment costs in order to get that to bring that site up to a good play value is estimated to be in the region of £30,000. So that would mean an additional cost in year 3 of £24,000. Similarly with Mayland Path, same costs apply to that site, but that would bring an additional cost of £24,000 to year 2 of the proposed programme. Methersgate and Barrington Gardens, they were both proposed for removal during year 5 of the programme, and removal of both of those sites it would cost in the region of £11,000. That cost would be moved to later in the programme. Duke's Place in Sandringham Road, that would have no effect on the proposed cost of the programme because one of these sites has been proposed for investment and one has been proposed for removal, and provision has been made in the proposed programme for those costs. So the community consultation has also provided clarification concerning the extent to which respondents agree with the council's proposed approach to the future provision of play areas across the borough. So 52% of respondents agree with the council's proposed approach, 24.9% disagree, and 23% didn't express an opinion either way. So just to conclude, I've provided an example of recent investment in play and the positive impact this has had on the play value of the site. So Kentview Road in Vange had investment of around £70,000 back in 2019, and this enabled new equipment for the site. Interestingly, this site was located in a different area of the park originally. So it was actually, we actually undertook consultation with the community in order to decide on the location of the play area, whether that should be moved from where it was to the rear of the community centre. And that's what the community decided they wanted. So the play area was moved to the rear of the community centre, and the design and equipment was chosen in consultation with the community as well. So as you can see, I've listed the new equipment that we've actually installed. The play value score of that site is 60%, with an overall site evaluation score of 58%. The overall site evaluation score of 58% takes into account the play value along with the other elements that are assessed regarding location and care and maintenance of the site as well. So this was what the site looked like before investment. So as you can see, it's very limited equipment there, 2 flat swings and 1 cradle swing and a slide. The site had a play value score of 24% and an overall site evaluation score of 38%. So as you can see, the investment has made a real impact on the play value for this site. Any questions?
If you can see your screen. And that one.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back into the meeting. It won't. Where is it? Can't. Oh, here it is, I think.
It's the green at the top. You have to stop sharing.
Oh, sorry. I was looking in the wrong place, wasn't I? I do apologise. That's it.
Right,
Apologies.
thank you, Tracy. Before we open the debate and on it, can I just draw members' attention to enclosure number 3, which is added to it because I wanted it to be on here tonight because it lists in the parks the infrastructure investment we put in the budget this year. And I did announce it at the budget meeting, but I thought that it should be on the agenda tonight, and I thought this was the appropriate place to add it, although there was no mention of it in the play review update. And as a consequence of that, I will be adding a recommendation to the recommendations. One that is that the committee approves the details of capital expenditure for improving infrastructure in the parks, as listed in enclosure number 3. That's additional to the recommendations. So the recommendations are: we consider the results of the community consultation exercise. We note them. We approve the suggested amendments to the proposed 10-year programme of investment rationalisation for the future provision, etc. And on 3, as it's worded, it's subject to the approval of the capital funding of full council. And 4, as it is there, I'll just ask Tracy now, do we need to move and have a recommendation on further consultation in PITSI? Because I've raised this so members know at the briefing, our chairman's briefing, on the fact that on the youth zone, PITSI and that area and Vange area, once again, there was a low take up at a consultation. And on this one as well, there's a low take up on consultation. And I've asked officers to look at the problems and the answer, the way we don't get a good result from PITSI and Vange areas on consultations. Because otherwise, I think it needs some improvement in the way we consult in those particular areas. So I'm asking Mr. Taylor or Mr. Brace, do we need to add something about PITSI?
You can add that we'll look at further engagement in PITSI and Vange, similar to the youth zone report. We will continue to do other forms of engagement and perhaps find other ways to consult with those communities. It's clearly a challenge to us at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Blake, did you have your? I thought you did. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. It's more an observation rather than a question. It just seems that we tend to, being old school, a bit like yourself, we tend to spend so much money now on the surfaces rather than the play equipment. Whereas in the old days, if we fell off, or we would actually jump off the swings onto the concrete. It just seems like this day and age that we do spend an awful lot of money on the health and safety, which we have to do. I understand that, but we could get so much more, money and more equipment for our residents if we was able to go back to the old days, the good old days.
Okay. I think Councillor Blake, though, I think the importance of this is we're concentrating on quality, not quantity. I think quality is very, very important. And I think the consultation, has come out very, very well in what we want to do. And I think it should be noted, and I've had long discussions with officers and Tracy and Grant and Paul on this, on looking at the ones where there were people's, let's have another look at some of these. And we did. And we'll come up with the ones we think should be looked at again, and we'll look at those and we'll make decisions on those. I think it's also, it may well be in the future that as year 4, 5, 6, 7 comes up, there may be areas we want to go with local consultation with as things arise when we're looking at them, because the surveys were important over the years, how we deal with them. I think the question of the ones in Billericay, which the town council want to look at, yes, it's a conversation to have, but I think any parish or town council will need to think that if they take it over, it's taking over the maintenance, it's inspections, and is the renewing of the equipment as well. It's not just taking over as it is, it means taking it over as is proposed over a 10-year programme. So I think that's also relevant in the conversations which officers will have with the Billericay Town Council and others. Okay.
Can I just say on that, Chairman, 100% agree. And in particular, also, you've got to mention regarding if town councils take over, it's the insurance as well, because I think we had issue over Lake Meadows with the skate park at one point. Yeah. So that's important as well. Thank you.
I heard about that. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Dadds.
I cannot support this report. I obviously support the quality of play, and I said previously at committee, we must make sure we reach out to all across the borough and the areas. I have particular concern around the consultation. You know, if I say to someone, would you like a really good quality play area or loads of mediocre, then at the end of the day, the consultation result will say, well, of course, we want quality over quantity. However, if it's rephrased that we will invest to a quality standard of play equipment in your area, the answer will be, yes, we want that. So I think it's completely, once again, consultation that will just get the answer you want. It's like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. In relation to the Billericay areas and the town council about them taking over, I think it's outrageous. There should be cut and slash and burn of all these play equipments and forcing it on the town council. They have raised concerns about these areas that should not be cut and slashed from the play areas, and they should be supported. We should be saying no. The town council said that they're identified, they add value, they should be kept, they should be maintained. We should invest in those and bring them up to the quality that residents want and deserve. So whilst I agree that we should have quality and investment, I cannot agree with 55 play areas in the borough being removed. And I can't agree that we're removing those ones in Billericay. We should be investing in those. We're putting millions and millions into one big play area in Basildon, but can't invest in these 9 areas in Billericay. I think it's a disgrace.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dadds. I should add that Billericay Town Council, what they want to do is consult local people on each of those 9 play areas first as well, and they might get the similar results which we got from those 9 particular play areas. I should also point out, and I'm sure Councillor Blake will confirm, that over some years, how many play areas were removed? There wasn't this level of consultation at all in how we did it. I'm sorry, how you did it. I'm sorry, I'm not blaming you, Councillor Blake, but how those administrations did it. And I wasn't part of one of those administrations at all. So that happened. We had a good consultation, and I totally reject the terms slash and cut.
Yeah, you have to.
Councillor Dadds, shush, please, shush. You're learning the lesson. You're gradually getting there. You'll get there completely soon. When I'm speaking.
Don't be patronising.
When I'm speaking.
Such.
Well,
don't be patronising.
Well, don't interrupt.
Don't be patronising.
Don't interrupt then.
Behave yourself. Behave yourself. You're a disgrace.
Live up to your title. Live up to your title.
You are a disgrace. Behave yourself.
Has to have the last word. I was saying, it's important we look after the play areas. We want to improve them. We've looked at them. A hell of a lot of work has gone into this. There's no cut and slash at all. It's been I think, a very, very good exhibition by officers with members, myself and other members, and all members were invited at meetings to come. Some didn't come, some didn't participate. I don't know why, but they didn't. We went across every ward to invite members to come to a consultation before it went out to the public, so that they had a say in the consultation, how it went out. And that's what happened. It's been very, very open. So I reject those criticisms most strongly, because that is a slur on not only myself as the chairman of this committee, but on the officers who went out of their way to perform this terrific review and get money, persuade us as members to put a 10-year fund in there to improve the play areas in this borough. You know, I think that's what's happened. That's what we're doing. Okay, we note that you don't agree. Councillor, no, I've got Councillor Henry with his hand up. I've seen the blue hand now, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to say thank you to Kevin and yourself for continuing with this. I think it is important that we look at the quality of these areas. I really do, and I'm grateful for the methodology in the consultation that's been used, and especially when that then in itself proves that there is some dealing with the results of that and affecting some changes. So that's a really, really, really useful thing. It's a bit one of those. It's a bit of a mixed bag. You know, no two parts of this town are the same. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of place. You know, I speak to other colleagues in other parts who are glad to see the back of these parks because they're anti-social magnets, and it is the way it is. But we're an ever-changing borough, and it is what it is. I think I would probably find myself tarred and feathered and tied to a set of monkey bars somewhere if I actually supported it. I welcome the report. I'm grateful to Tracy for the time that she's put in tonight explaining it and the work that the officers have put in. I think there's some work to do, but I think it's a definite right direction, and you know, I'm very happy with a good bit of the content in the report, but I've also got to reflect my own voters, and my voters aren't happy that they didn't necessarily get their way on some of this stuff. So while I thank you and welcome the work of your team and officers, I'm afraid I can't support it either, but thank you anyway, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I think if this had come up in July or something, I think it would have got unanimous support, but there we go. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From my perspective, it really does a favour for my area where I'm a councillor. It's great you've amended it to take in that little park in Great Gregory. Well used, well liked. The residents around there are very good at litter picking, pulling up the local councillors when the pavement's not right. And last spring, Rob Baker had me and him had a visit and sorted out those faults. That's great you've amended it to save the park equipment in Great Gregory. That's really great. One other thing that really pleased me about it, a few days before Mum passed on, as you know, she was councillor for Landon Hills. And as you all know, she was good at nagging.
I know.
And she was on at me of things to do when I'm dead. The cat, the post and everything else was a given, yeah? But the one thing she nagged me about was the park at the recreational grounds. She went, I'll come back and haunt you if you don't get that play equipment done. Don't worry about the voters. I will personally come back to haunt you. And that's what she said, you know, before she slipped into a coma. And that was the one thing she was on at me about. Get that recreational ground. And not only does this play review get the 120 grand for the recreational grounds to replace the rotten play equipment that had to be pulled out because it was made of wood. In year 2, Great Berry's on the list for works as well. So from my perspective, I'd like to thank the officers. It's really fantastic. And hopefully I won't be hearing any china flying off the wall at my direction.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Smith. I should add that I was rather at the budget meeting when the opposition were proposing only £30,000 for the Langdon Hills Recreation Ground, and I was trying to tell the mover there's £120,000 in the budget already. Why do you want to cut it to £30,000? But there we go. Councillor Blake, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, a couple of things. Not all opposition were voting for that. I'm opposition, but I wasn't voting for that. So
I apologise.
And I'm sure what I'm about to say before I go to the main point, Kerry would take this in the way that it is meant. He's beginning to sound a bit like Del Boy when he's talking to Rodney about how many things that his mother said as he went into a coma. So I'm sure he'll take that in the humour that is meant. So I might have to start calling him Del Boy soon. But the other point I want to make is that I heard what Councillor Dad says, but he seems to forgot that he supported, as I did when I was the cabinet member and chairman. We closed over 100, around about that figure of 100. None of them were built on. To be fair, it was done in the same sort of process. We did have consultation with ward members and whatnot, but we done that. And you might have some point that you made earlier. Maybe this is another point of the year that the actual vote might be different regarding Councillor Daz. But I have to be honest with you, it's exactly what we done. You're just continuing something that we started and the officers doing a grand job on it, to be fair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and the work that you've done with officers on this report, and I appreciate the transparent manner that this whole process has been carried out with, from the conversations that we had last summer as members of this committee, having briefings and having our opportunity to influence that, then going down to, or then having meetings with group leaders, putting it out to group leaders and giving them the opportunity to influence the decisions being made, then inviting ward members to have discussions prior to the consultation that took place. And I know in my own ward in Pitsea, when we came together to have discussions, we were all there to represent our residents and share our thoughts on these proposals. I also think what we see tonight is an administration that's listening to residents, and the purpose behind a consultation is to go out and seek their views, listen to what residents say, and then we can act on it. We've seen tonight with some comments that have come back from residents, when they've come back in significant number, we've been able to change the investments in those particular areas that we're proposing. We've seen when other organisations want to look at the management of them themselves, we're open to that conversation. This is not this 10-year plan that we're proposing here is the start of the conversation. Many more will carry on as we go through, but it's about giving our young people the best quality play equipment and the play areas that they want. This is the start. Our residents are on board with it. I hope all members become on board with it because it is going to make a real difference to the communities that we seek to serve.
I agree. Can I just say this? I could easily, and I've tried to take the politics out of all of this, is I've tried to bring forward items which I think can easily be put on the back burner and probably have been done in the past. They're on this agenda tonight. It is the play area review. It is waste strategy. It is the climate change, which should have been here a long while ago. It is a tree strategy, because this council's never had one. And I've decided that this may well be my last meeting as chairman, and there's things I wanted to bring forward because I wanted to lead this committee. You can praise the Lord there, Councillor Dads, but I would say God help him if you got in charge. But there we go. But I wanted to lead this committee in a good place when I leave it, if I have to leave it, and I think after tonight it will be, thanks to I think the support of good members of this committee, really good members of this committee. Can I just, before we take the vote, can I just point out, for the first time, capital funding for infrastructure in the park. First time. That enables us to reopen the Lake Bridge in Northlands Park. New signage, additional lighting, installation of new lamp columns around the west side of the lake. Repairs to the footpaths and steps, sorting out the problems. Lake Meadows, sorting out the crazy golf area, which has been inactive for a long time and no good, and putting a new picnic area in there. Wickford Memorial Park signage, improving the access at the Rumwell Road entrance to where the memorial is, new fencing, etc. Gloucester Park, bins and benches, drainage, new signage, the Wick Country Park, the access road into the park, improving the boardwalks in the park and signage, Wattyler Country Park, the miniature railway improvement, signage, road and footpath repairs, fencing and gates, and Norsey Wood footpath and road toppings. Councillor Henry, you said at the meeting, last time at the budget meeting, nothing for Victoria Park. I recall it. Now, this is where I come to you. What have you asked for at all for Victoria Park? You might remember, Councillor Henry, you came to me when I had some members' investment that you wanted something done. I think, was it Blue House?
No, let me correct this. I was asked to make a list of things that I would like to see investment in, and I did. And I did you a disservice because I didn't actually mention the fact that you gave me £5,000 for gates for the paddocks. It wasn't relevant because we'd already had it. That's what it was. And the residents association, they're very grateful for them because they did exactly what they were meant to do, and they've kept the cars and the drugs and all of that out of the car park. We haven't managed to get them away from the shops, but you can't put gates on everything. But I am grateful for the support that your committee and your members actually gave me for that. And it was wrong of me not to mention it, but we were talking about the shopping list that was mentioned, and there wasn't a Victoria Park item on it. But I am grateful for the help that you've given me so far.
No, but seriously, Victoria Park is one of the newer parks, as you know. But I'm sure the officers, if any infrastructure needs improvement there, I'm sure there may be some room for movement within this budget. You know, because I want to make sure all the parks have the correct infrastructure to the best of our ability across the parks. Okay, with that in mind, I'd like to take the resolutions. I'll tell you why. I've got three people wanting a 5-minute break at the end of this item. For a variety of reasons. We can laugh. Okay, we consider the results. We've considered the result. Having considered the results of the community consultation exercise, we approve the suggested amendments to the proposed 10-year programme of investment and rationalisation for the future provision of play within the borough, as set out in the report. Approve the proposed 10-year programme investment and rationalisation for the future provision of play within the borough, which rather sounds about the same. Authorises officers to explore the option of town, village or parish councils taking over responsibility for play areas that have been proposed for removal within their geographical areas of responsibility, and also ask officers to review how we engage with the residents of the Pitsea and Vange areas.
Can we take them separate, please?
Pardon?
Can we take them separate, please?
No, I'm taking them on block. I'm taking them on block. Okay, if you unmute yourselves, Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub.
In favour.
Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Councillor Henry.
For reasons I gave, against. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'm in favour. Councillor Dadds.
Against.
Against. Okay, thank you. Well, now, what's the time? Look at that. 7 minutes past. We'll be back here at 12 minutes past. Okay, for those members who needed to go somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I shall bid you adieu.
I can't see Julie. I looked up to the top left-hand corner. It's recording now. I think we're on. We move now to the climate change policy, which is item 11 on the agenda, pages 87 to 104. It's quite a detailed report there on climate change. The policy is there, but this is now only the introduction and asking officers to approve the policy so that they can develop a climate change strategy and a climate action plan to deliver the policy. I've got Rachel Glover here who's going to introduce it, but I think it's fairly straightforward. We need to have a climate change policy. I think it's been a long time coming. In my view, it should have been here long before now, but it's here now, and we're going to have a policy. The strategy will be developed and we'll make progress. Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. I will take it as read that members have an understanding about climate change and the global position. But obviously at local level, climate change and more specifically global warming has the potential to create impacts on our residents, both and our businesses and our local environment, including through more extreme weather with hotter, drier summers and wetter winters. I think we've noticed the fact that looking out the window today, the significantly windy, wet weather we've got affecting food production, water shortages, or flooding and local infrastructure and health impacts. The government is obviously pushing to try and bring forward the net zero greenhouse gas emissions across the UK economy by 2050 and has acknowledged that the local government has a key role to play in that, indicating support will be provided to local government on that journey. So taking positive action now is important. We need to try and get ahead of the game, and as community leaders we have got a key role to play within Basildon to get our own house in order, but also to work with our local businesses and residents to try and achieve the same across the borough itself. As a council, we're already addressing our impact on carbon emissions through a number of initiatives, including the consideration of our impacts during the development of the waste strategy and the way that we encourage recycling, collection and processing of waste, biodiversity arrangements, for example, the pollinator policy and the proposed tree strategy that members are hearing about tonight, our approach to estate renewal and integration with planning policy, focus on active travel arrangements through the LDP and also as part of a number of commercial initiatives. Considerations will include the use of fuel efficient heating and transport, including through use of electric or potentially even hydrogen vehicles, and technological initiatives such as carbon capture and storage. We've recently been successful on securing grant funding to enable the council to work to decarbonise its own buildings as part of that initial move. So this policy, which is quite high level, is brought before members tonight to support the emerging climate strategy and delivery plan, which are in the process of being pulled together with the cross-cutting climate and environment work programme. So this will deliver activity across a number of key themes as set out in the report, seeking to coordinate the council's approach to this work. This will need to remain very agile. I think members and certainly officers are very mindful of the fact that there is an awful lot of change in this area at the moment. We need to be responsive to changing technologies and funding streams, but embedding consideration of climate as part of decision-making processes and our business as usual will be fundamental to taking this forward, and influencing and working with those around us. Lobbying of government will also be an important part of our action. We need to build and maintain our baseline data so that we can understand how the operations of the council through its building services and working practices impact on the environment, and how we can measure those improvements, how we can minimise energy usage and the benefits that will also give in terms of financial savings, exploring opportunities for decarbonisation of heat and maximisation of renewable energy regeneration in the borough, increasing things like the use of pool bikes and electric vehicles or other ultra low emission vehicles on the fleet. We're also working already actively with our partners through Acela and Basildon Business Group to identify best practice and opportunities for partnership working. We have a number of large businesses in the borough who are at the forefront of green technology and good practice, and we can certainly learn from them as well. And there's also opportunities through the use of new technologies through, for example, energy saving apps and other digital solutions, also which has helped to be brought forward as a result of the COVID, one of the positives of COVID. So the policy seeks to address two targets for change: a target of becoming carbon neutral by 2030 at organisational level, with ongoing activity beyond that date in support of the wider UK target of 2050. Carbon neutral in this respect refers to the ability to offset the emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases through creating savings elsewhere in the emissions network. Members are therefore being asked to endorse the draft climate change policy as included with this report as the overarching ambition for dealing with climate change at local level. This will then be supported by a much more detailed climate change strategy and associated action plan, which are in development and which will set out how these aspirations of the policy will be taken forward. Thank you, members. If there's any questions.
Rachel, here tonight, or?
Sorry, Councillor.
It's Javier.
Javier's not on tonight. No, he's not on tonight.
No, he's not. I just must pay him some support, though he's not present, because I did meet him when he first started on this, and it started off as a 68-page report. And the progress you're making. This is a policy, but there's so much involved. So when you develop the strategy, etc., which goes across all activities of the council, the businesses, everybody. And when you think the Climate Change Act started off in 2008, was amended in 2019, and suddenly the dates in it started getting closer. And as they start getting closer, people become more active and want a need to do something. And I think a lot of it is for local authorities, especially, and it applies to the waste strategy as well, is so that the Prime Minister, when he goes to Glasgow in November, he'll have a lot to say, I think, about climate, and therefore the dates are there, and local authorities are having to get their acts together very, very quickly, and we are one of them. Okay, members, if not, the policy is quite clear there. Councillor Henry, Jeff, you just moved over to the other side of the screen.
Sorry, you're all very, very in the same place. I would say, look, I really, really, really welcome this report. I think this is a really, really important piece of work. You know, we're doing a lot of work at Essex as well, and it's great to finally start to see everybody sort of heading in the same direction, as opposed to some people are talking about it, other people are thinking it's centuries away. There's been so much drag on this and so little commitment. So to see, you know, both local governments at all levels and central government as well putting this high on the agenda, it's a really, really important thing. I think it's a really good starting point, and I think, you know, it's great. It'd be very useful and very helpful if we can pull in from the Essex Climate Change Commission and get whatever help and assistance we can get with them, and work with as many people as possible. I've had many discussions at county, and sometimes, you know, there's great big plans and great big ambitions, but the targets are so far away, there's absolutely no impetus to do a damn thing about it, you know, especially if you look at the dates they were talking about for electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles and things like that. When you're talking 10, 20, 30 years, you know, that's another 5 complete model refreshes. They don't even need to be thinking about that yet, you know, for a long time. So I think it's a really, really, really important step, and certainly a council with 186,000 people, you know, under its wing, we should have a position on it, and I very much welcome this report and support it fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What I would do is, it's quite clear, we approve the first climate change policy. and authorise officers to develop a climate change strategy and climate action plan to deliver the policy. I think that's important. Rachel, you might, or Paul might answer this for me, one of you will. Will this go cross-committee from now on in? Because the strategies surely will affect other committees as well, yes?
Yeah, we'll be coming back with an engagement process for all members because it does impact on many different strategies and decision making. So the strategy will be done hand in hand with members because it'll be important that we understand as Councillor Henry has just orated quite beautifully, this is a massive subject and there's a hell of a lot of work to do. So it is going to become a major priority for us, as certainly as we get nearer to 2030, and that is only 8 years away, really. So by the time we get sort of 2 or 3 years down the line, there will be a lot of pressure to do a lot of work. So it will be done across the board in terms of committees where there are impacts in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. Can I just say my disappointment with this is on March the 1st, we did organise an all-member briefing on climate change, and I was disappointed. I think it was 50% or just under members who actually turned up to listen to what was a very excellent presentation, which is basically here tonight, but it was much wider on how it affects the council overall rather than just the policy. And so I'm disappointed that a lot of members didn't turn up for that, but so be it. Okay, the recommendations. Councillor Ferguson, if you unmute yourselves, please. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Right, I'm looking now. Councillor Henry.
In favour.
In favour.
Jacob.
Favour.
And Councillor Dadds. Councillor Dadds.
Yes, in favour.
Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move on to item 12, the biodiversity plan update. Can I just, before we start, I think Mr. Reynolds is here with Mr. Brace. Can I just, as we were only asked first of all to consider and comment on the report, I intend to we approve the report regarding completed works and future works to improve and enhance biodiversity in the borough, including 5 community woods, 5 circles of trees as remembrance areas in each of the 5 towns of the borough. And also we note the provision of an additional £30,000 if required, for the completion of the activities at Beauchamps Field, Wickford. The money is in the budget. It's there if we cannot get other funding elsewhere. I think I'm correct, Mr. Brace?
That's right. In the member of estimate amount for this committee, there was an allocation that could be used for this. Yes, yeah. Councillor.
But we're looking for alternative funding anyway, so it may not be used. So they're the recommendations. The report is there. Mr. Reynolds.
Councillor, it will be me, Grant Taylor, giving the initial report, and I think Hugh's going to speak about the tree side of things.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you very much. So this report is a piece of work we've done over some period of time now, originally in response to the National Pollinator Strategy. So I'm pleased to say that a 3-year pollinator action plan was developed following it being agreed at this committee in September 2019. So this work has been going on for some period. This work was done was established to build on current practice and initiatives and make simple changes to land management, bringing in the experience and enthusiasm of local people, organisations and individuals to be able to impact on this important work. When we were here last time, we set out many of the different things that we were looking to do under this piece of work. Clearly, as we would expect to hear from Andy's report, the current pandemic has messed around with some of the timing, but I am really, really pleased that we've managed to still deliver an awful lot over this period. And I just wanted to set out, I guess, a few things here in relation to stuff we've done since we last reported back on this in the last 18 months, and also some of our planned work. So members will see in the report some the work we've been doing around tree planting, the Gloucester Park orchard of 125 fruit trees being planted, 50 oak trees in areas of Basildon, Pitsea and Wickford, the 300 saplings being planted in Wickford, Landon and Vange, and very, very recently, more so than this report, the planting of the cherry trees in Wick Country Park, again working with some of the brilliant local volunteers like the Wickford Wombles. So we're really, really keen to be continuing the planting of trees over the next year. Already identified mixed species of just over 3,000 trees going into Beauchamps Field, and the 200 fruit trees, and looking at further opportunities to bring more trees into the borough, and looking at sponsorship opportunities like crowdfunding and the like, how we can really galvanise that sense of interest from local communities. And I know we've discussed this at this committee previously. We are making progress on that. So I will pass over to Hugh when I'm done, but clearly on here there's a tree planting framework that Hugh's pulled together, which I think is really, really important, and I'm sure he'll want to speak to you about that. With regards to wildflower meadows, lots and lots of activity here, again working with friend groups and community groups, doing stuff in Lake Meadows, Cranfield Park, Wickford Memorial Park. We have plans for Kentview Road, Northlands Park and Gloucester Park soon. Also the sowing of wildflowers on 11 roundabouts, bringing those areas into our biodiversity planning, and then just general that kind of thinning out of the woodland to enable wildflowers and grasses to have the access to grow and access to the sun better. So how do we manage, I guess, our existing resources to be able to improve the biodiversity and improve its impact for our habitat mixture. Moving on to the relaxation of mowing, that's just been a really simple way we've been able to do this on Upper Main and Never Main, and we're working over the next year to include all of the main routes into the borough. And giving some statistics on this work has resulted in the council's relaxed mowing regime increasing by 20,000 square metres during 2021, and this will be increased by a further 32,000 square metres during summer 21. So really, really important with how we can use some of the less obvious spaces to be able to make an impact. Conserving pollinators through local planning and green infrastructure works is a central way to which we work. So we're very much working with our planning colleagues to ensure that any new developments have got biodiversity at their heart, and the team and planning work really, really well on that. And we expect to see more such positive work. And there's a number of things that are ongoing in that way currently. And yeah, finally, the report lists a number of the different ways in which we work with our communities and our partners, and we're really keen to continue that. And we very much would like to take this opportunity as the head of service to thank those members of our community that play such an important role, working with my team, who are incredibly enthusiastic about this work to ensure that our borough remains a beautiful place for people to enjoy. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Grant. Hugh.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll never get away from trees. So the biodiversity plan update, though, so enclosure 2 has the tree planting framework, and this outlines the aims and objectives for tree planting within the borough and commits to developing a tree strategy during this year, 2021. In the framework, we've got the aims and objectives. So the aim is to increase the number of trees that are planted in the borough that make a positive contribution to the urban forest. And that's a concept that's been developed some 20, 30 years ago. And that includes all the trees within our borough, within the urban environment, which makes up that term, the urban forest. So within the framework, there is the definition of the urban forest there. The framework also includes 3 objectives that we're trying to achieve. First of all, with tree planting, we want urban amelioration. That's the positive effect that trees have on the climate within the borough itself. We've spoken on a couple of items tonight about the polluting effects of some of the things that may happen in the borough. Now, if we need to mitigate that, the best way in some respects of mitigating that and getting other positive benefits is through the planting of trees. And listed there are just some of the examples of the way trees can and will ameliorate the urban environment for us. Also, the framework, as Grant's already alluded to, is feeding into one, the biodiversity action plan and the pollinator action plan, plus the previous item about the climate change is also feeding into that, because it does have, the tree planting will have big benefits to both of those plans going forward. Also with the framework, there is the action plan, which lists the factors that supports the tree planting. So, for example, what species they're going to use, the size of trees, the locations, the types of plantings. So that's all listed down there, and that will all be explored and described within the strategy itself that we produced this year. And we finished the framework off with tree retention, because as important as planting many new trees within the borough, we also got to make sure that we retain the trees in sensible locations throughout the borough so they can continue to give the benefits, which is why they need to be retained. So there's some examples of the important effects that trees have of mitigating within the urban environment. And one of the things we must consider is that the larger the tree, the better benefit it gives from urban amelioration. So it's just something that we'll consider, we'll bring back to committee for members to decide upon. So that's the tree planting framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Okay, I think it's important. Biodiversity is important. I was pleased in 2019 that we could introduce the pollinator plan and putting money in towards it to start it off. There's additional money in the budget this year to continue it. Hopefully, we're looking. I know that officers are working together at the moment for some sort of crowdfunding so that anyone who wishes to contribute towards trees can. So I think it's important that we encourage the communities in the areas to plant trees. Some are doing it across the borough already, and hopefully more will follow. Who wishes to come in on trees? I think it's important. To me, it's quite simple. We've got a strategy, we've got a plan, we've got a pollinator plan. We know what we're doing this year in terms of tree planting. We've got some in line. We know what we're doing with the wildflowers, etc. I think the contribution on the roundabouts is very important. And last year, the number of people who complimented the council on what we were doing, hopefully it will be even better this year. Councillor Henry.
I think trees are one of those subjects that, maybe nobody talks about until you try to remove one. Anything we've ever tried to do in this borough, no matter what we've tried to do, the Landon Centre, people are very passionate about this. I think there's a real good opportunity. You mentioned community engagement there. There's a real good opportunity perhaps to work with local multi-academy trusts and other schools. And I think there's a great opportunity for an education piece to get kids planting them. I know that, not everything you stick in the ground will grow. And sometimes there's no success with some of these plantings, so that you have to go back and do it again or do it differently. But I have no problem at all supporting this. I think it's a good next step again. But I really do think there's fantastic opportunities to bring the community in and get them working with it, especially schools, younger people. They'll be less inclined to climb them, break them if they've planted them and nurtured them themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got no other people with their hands up. So in that case, the recommendations are, I'll try to get them again. The committee notes the completed works and improves the future works to improve and enhance biodiversity in the borough, to include 5 community woods and 5 circles of trees as remembrance areas in each of the 5 towns of the borough. This is in line with what the National Trust are trying to do with these circles of, I think they were basically cherry trees they were supporting, and I think some areas in the borough you may well get contributions from local communities who wish to actually go along with this as well. And the other one was approve the adoption of the tree planting framework, and also note to put the additional provision of £30,000 for Beauchamps Field, Wickford, if needed. Okay, is that clear? Right, okay, to the vote. Councillor Ferguson, if you unmute yourself, please, sorry.
In favour.
Councillor Henry.
In favour.
Debate.
In favour.
Yakub.
In favour.
You're muted. Councillor Councillor Daz, you're muted.
Are you calling me?
Yeah, in fact, you were voting? Yes.
Yes, in favour.
Thank you.
I can't hear you, sorry.
I'm in favour. Okay, that's carried. We'll now move on to the Wickford Memorial Park trees. That was an additional agenda item which was published. Basically, it's the background. The background is there, and the recommendation is the committee notes the report and approves the retention of the 3 memorial trees and authorises officers to make the necessary arrangements for the underpinning of the building referred to. I think that now meets what we decided at the last committee. I'm not sure, Mr. Reynolds, if we have managed to sort out the Scots pine for the memorial tree to be this replacing the ash. But you want to come in, Hugh?
Yes, specifically on the report, or just that specific item about the Scots pine. I'm happy to go through the report if you want me to, or we just stay on the Scots pine.
I think it's quite clear because we went through it before. Yeah. It's basically what was there before. On the tree preservation orders, all TPO requests are prioritised depending on whether the trees may be in danger of imminent felling. These now are not. As these trees are not in imminent danger of felling, they have been added to the list of trees for preservation. The necessary assessment has been undertaken prior to an order being drawn up, and it's likely the group TPO will be served, which I think will satisfy what people have asked for. We're now leaving it to officers. I understand from Mr. Brace that we are able to find the necessary money for the underpinning within the budget. And I think this is a successful outcome, a difficult one to achieve, but I think we've taken it on board as a committee, and that is, we've got the right answer in the end. So if everyone is happy with that, Councillor Daz?
I'd like to just comment briefly. May I?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think we've got there in the end, and I'm pleased. I stood firm to say that we've got to do this, and we had to find an alternative way. And I'm pleased that you came on board with that idea, and that we didn't just rip these trees out, and that we preserve them, and we go back and look at problem solving so that we can protect the memories and the value that we place on these trees. So I'm grateful for the officers to going back and re-looking at it, and I'm also grateful for you changing your mind. And that this preserves what people did historically, and we're here as custodians to make sure going forward they are preserved, and other people, other councillors, hopefully like myself, will stand up and won't just roll over, and will fight for what is right. So I'm pleased. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daz. I'll just correct you. I did not change my mind. If you recall, I actually did something which you seconded in the end. And so don't confuse the situation. I had an officer's report come forward which said a certain course of action. I took on board what I wanted to do, and then the committee agreed with you and me, and we decided we'd retain the trees. it's great that you wish to take credit for it. It was a committee decision. It's hard work to get to this situation, because we had to look at the insurance problem. We had to look, and as a responsible council, we had to look at the other options first to make sure that we were doing the thing properly. We have done it properly. It's taken a while, and it's not a question of flag waving. I got it. It was my idea. Anyway, we'll go to the vote. Recommendation is the committee notes the report and approves the retention of the 3 memorial trees and authorises officers to make necessary arrangements for the underpinning of the building referred to. Councillor, if I unmute yourselves, please. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Henry.
Sorry, did you say me?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Is my voice going? I think it must be.
No. You cut out every now and again, and if you move the papers, it sounds like you're drilling into the wall or something. But that's it. Thank you.
Are you in favour or against?
I said all that, and you didn't even hear that. Okay, in favour.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blake.
In favour.
Yes, in favour. Well done.
We can't hear you.
Councillor Yacoub, are you in favour?
In favour.
And I'm in favour. Right, we now move on to the last item, the waste strategy update, which is on pages 121. It starts at the recommendations. Can you hear me? Make the recommendations. That the Director of Community and Environment is given approval to procure food waste collection vehicles to meet operational lead times for vehicle delivery following detailed assessment of options and infrastructure requirements. That the committee notes the progress undertaken through the Waste Member Working Group and approves the proposed trial of mixed dry recyclables. There's a report there. I'm hoping you've all read it. It was a good working group. A decision made by the working group on the way to have this dried recycles trial on Note Bridge. Mr. Henry, do you wish to come in on this? You've been sitting there patiently since 7 o'clock, and I'd hate for you to lose this moment in time.
Henry.
Thank you, Chairman, and yeah, thank you for bringing me in there. I appreciate the hours late, and thank you for your time this evening. Just to kind of run through a couple of bits on the report. We spoke earlier about climate change. One of the big things that we're doing around climate change is obviously, as Rachel mentioned earlier, is around the work that we're doing on the waste strategy. We have been through a lot of work through the Waste Member Working Group, and I would like to say thanks to this committee and the members of that working group for their ongoing support and openness, and I found it really constructive. And a big part of what we're looking at tonight is around the preference for electric vehicles, which was suggested strongly by both the working group and then endorsed at this committee at a previous meeting. Unfortunately, due to the lead times, we do need to get moving on that relatively quickly, which is why we're bringing that to committee tonight. We'd also like to, obviously, for members of this group to note the progress of the member working group around the mixed dry recyclables, which was an area that the Waste Member Working Group was tasked to look at in light of the particularly changes around the Environment Bill, which are likely to drive up a requirement for quality materials over quantity, a reduction in single-use plastics, a focus on improving our environmental performance across the borough. And part of what we wanted to do as part of that group was to trial some of the different container methods in order to get some good quality resident feedback and to begin that engagement piece moving forward. So I did say I wouldn't talk too long. Hopefully that wasn't too long, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, James. Okay, that's quite clear. Members.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, yeah, again, we're risking repeating myself. Again, I have to say the working group is working extremely well. It really has done a grand job. And just for other members on this committee, information who was on it, Councillor Sargent was in support of the Notebridge area being done. So I think that's important. Obviously, I don't know whether she fed that back to you, but in case you felt that that wasn't the case, she is in support of that. So, but again, yeah, a lot of hard work going into it, and look forward to the progress, seeing how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Yeah, Notebridge was chosen. A, it's close to the depot if there's any problems. Secondly, there's diverse areas within there which we can pick from the 300 properties. And so hopefully it will give us a good result. Councillor Dadds.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank the officer first for the report and the work. I will be supporting the recommendations, but I do want to add this, though, is that I would have liked to have seen more of a phased approach to the vehicle, the introduction of the electric vehicles, even if it was, 25% and then moving to 50% and phasing it and just making sure it works for us and managing costs. But I will support this. I understand the methodology behind it, but I'm part of me thinks that we should have maybe done a bit more of a phased approach. That's my only observation.
Okay, you mean a phased approach on the leasing of the vehicles?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Brace can come in on that. I think it's about lead times. Mr. Brace.
Yeah, I understand where the councillor's coming from. The issue we've got is if we lease a vehicle, it will be a 7-year lease run. So that the fact is we'll be going to a much smaller vehicle, a 12-ton instead of a 26-ton. So the phasing would mean we'll be sending a dust cart down to pick up food waste. So we will have more freighters than we actually need. So this is the one that will have the biggest impact in terms of changing the vehicles, and it's the lead time. So it will be quite complicated to make it an efficient service, sending very large trucks to carry small amounts of food waste. So this is probably the one where the vehicles would need to change the quickest, depending on what's picked going forward. But that's the reason why we'll be shifting this part of the business to electric in total at the same time, because it will be the right vehicle for the job, purpose built for food waste collection. So that's the reason why it's been done in one lump, because we'd have to procure smaller vehicles. So whether we bought diesel and electric, but members of the working group were certainly very clear that they wanted all electric as soon as possible. So that was their thought process behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. No, that's quite clear, especially as food waste has to be separated from green waste. That's the first job, which is going to have to take place fairly quickly, and the lead time for ordering is important. Okay. No one else. Is everyone happy then with the recommendations on page 121? If so, we'll take the vote. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Blake.
In favour.
Henry.
In favour.
Jakub.
In favour.
I'm in favour. Are you not voting, Councillor Dadds?
No, in favour, please.
Thank you. That's unanimous. That's the completion of the agenda. A very good meeting. Thank you for your cooperation mainly. Hopefully, we'll see you all on the 18th of March at the full council meeting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Good night, members. Good night.
Good night all. Thank you.
Good night, members.